We are resuming our Board of Behavioral Sciences. Today is November 6th. The time is 1:44 p.m. My name is Max Disposti. I'm the board chair of the Board of Behavioral Sciences. We are resuming our agenda item number 19 with the report of our executive officer. That I don't see Steve now. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That will be actually conducted by Steve today.
Okay.
Oh, partially.
Partially. We're going to tag team this.
Okay, so half and half.
Yes. So what I'm going to report on our budget. So your budget for this fiscal year 2020-2021 is just shy of $12.5 million. And the memo is a little short because that's the information that we have to date. But we hope to provide you more detailed information in the future. But essentially, we've, based on our receipts and information we have available to us, we've spent about 12% of our existing budget. And currently in our fund condition, you'll notice that it is reflecting a negative balance. However, the fund condition that was provided to you is not an updated one to reflect the fee increase. You may recall from previous budget reports that when the fee increase was included in the fund condition, we reflected a very positive balance. So that's pretty much it on the budget. I will add that they have released some reports, and our budget analyst is now looking at those reports that are available through Fiscal and getting acquainted with them. And so we anticipate being able to provide you more detailed information at a future meeting. So are there any questions? No. Okay.
We're moving to operation reports, right? Okay. Steve, we can't hear you.
Are you seeing the operation report on the screen?
We don't.
No. Okay.
You like us?
I'm sorry. So the operation report, I was just got from our tech people on presentation mode. I'm not sure if you've seen. I think I'm going to move ahead so you can hear me at least.
Do you want me to share it, Steve, for you?
No, I don't want to share it. I guess there was. Oh. If everyone's fine with how the way things are looking, let's move forward. Okay. So operation reports. This is going to give you a little bit of the stats and show you kind of what's going on. I'm going to be very brief. It looks like a lot of what the big content I was going to talk about was kind of the examination stuff, which we already went over. This is our busy season of the year from June, July, and August. This is where we get a lot of our applications for the registrations. That's because of the graduations. So as you can see that during this time, we had a 47% increase in applications during the last 3 months. It's a lot. And our registration desks have been very busy, but they've been keeping up on it, thank gosh. We've had, if you notice, there's kind of an interesting thing. AMFT registrations really had a 91% increase as opposed to the ASW registrations, which are 28% increase. There was a little bit, it seemed like the big push for ASWs came in earlier. So for some reason, we were seeing the AMFTs come in at a later date. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But as you can see, huge increases during this season. We are kind of starting to level out and get back to a more, I guess, more relaxed level. I don't know if you want to say relaxed level. I know that the evaluators are happy that we're slowing down. Looking at that, it's kind of mentioning the processing dates. Definitely the processing dates for the registration desks have gone up. As you can see, by AMFT went up 11 days and ASW by 22 days. That's fairly common and fairly normal. Those by the next quarter, you will see will shrink significantly. The other processing days that we're looking at, which are kind of very important, are the LMFT, LCSW exam applications. And for just to clarify, those are the applications where people are applying for the clinical exam, submitting all their hours for their licenses. So those are the applications that take most of our time to evaluate. They're the most complicated. We have processing times were down or are down in both. I mean, not down in both. They've increased in both over the last 6 months. But during this last quarter, the the LCSWs and the LMFT evaluation desks have been able to actually cut into that delay. Part of it was due to staffing, and actually most of it was due to staffing. And so now what we've recognized is we have the staffing levels back up, and the staff are actually trained, and we will definitely see those times also be reducing. As you can see, LMFTs have gone down by 49 days, and then LCSW by 13 days. And we just have one new evaluator that has, I was told this week, that she is ready and trained and ready to go on her own. So Kelly will be attacking those evaluations also. So that's good. We had 1,739 initial licenses that were issued, meaning full licensure. Brings us to 122,000 approximately licensees and registrants as our population. And that 1% increase, we always consistently over the last few years have seen a 1% increase per quarter. I don't expect that's going to actually go down. So I'm not sure if it's going to increase much by more, but it will keep increasing. Total renewal activities. Just kind of wanted to show you, we had first quarter, we had 18,000, now we have 16,000, 13% difference from last quarter. Number doesn't really, I don't know if it really means much, but that's how much renewals we do during the year. Most of those are actually done. The renewals, I think we're probably at a 95% renewal rate where people are renewing online. So that's kind of good. Administrative applications, these are anything from name changes, address changes, duplicate licenses. And I apologize, for some reason, I'm looking at my screen thinking that you are looking at a screen too. So, so I will kind of be more eloquent here. The one I kind of wanted to point out is address changes. In the fourth quarter, we had 2,800 address changes. In the first quarter of this year, we had 4,000 approximately address changes. That's a 48% difference. I think part of that is for the staff's efforts to reach out to exam candidates to get us their appropriate email address, and they've been doing that. And so candidates have been reaching out and actually changing their addresses online to make sure that we have proper email address so they can get the communication from Pearson VUE, which is a good thing. We like to have the email address because it's a great way to communicate. We are happy to say that we hired Cynthia Burnett as an exam manager, one of the two managers that we were actually able to bring on board. And Cynthia's been with us for 12 years, so she knows the board. She's going to be a little bit new to the administrative side, but I have faith in her and she'll do an excellent job. She's already jumping in there. So that's part of her duties is the exam program, exam team. She also does cashiering and the registration desk. So she is working with staff right now to kind of training her and learning how to process eligibilities and working with Pearson VUE and such. She's getting familiarized with that. So luckily we have Marcia Gov, who's been with the exam unit for quite a long time. We're trying to get Cynthia to grab all the knowledge possible out of her. So because soon enough, Marcia will be retiring. And what I was talking about a while back in our exam administration, we administered 4,800 exams in the last quarter. and that's a 75% increase from the first quarter of, from the fourth quarter of last year. And that is basically, as you know, is because of the COVID shutdown and such. We shut down examinations for a short period of time in March, opened up back in April, and we're just making up for lost time on that. Here, I wanted to talk about the impact of COVID-19. I think you've talked quite a bit before about candidates having issues with scheduling exams. I don't want to rehash that. I do want to just kind of clarify, just to make sure everybody knows, we do have extensions that not extensions, but waivers out there that are hopefully, that's the only way we can really help exam candidates with the requirements that are in place. The one important one is we have a 20-month extension for exam eligibility. So that means eligibilities are good for a year, and this is for the clinical exams. And if you have an expiration date that happens between March 31st and December 31st, you will get an extension that will basically give you 20 months eligibility time frame. So the 20 months will be from the time you are actually either approved for the exam or the last time you actually took the exam. Staff is working diligently. It seems easy just saying we're going to give you a 20-month extension, but there's a lot in the back end that has to go on with the systems and the generating eligibilities and sending them over to the various exam vendors. So that's been taking up a lot of time, but I can say Lisa's been helping out with that, and a bunch of staff have pitched in. So make sure that eligibilities get over there. The other one is a waiver for subsequent registrations. Part of the requirements for a subsequent registration is that you have actually passed the law and ethics. This waiver actually allows a registrant to bypass that requirement. If their current registration expires between March 31st and December 31st, they can actually apply for a subsequent registration and be granted a subsequent registration without a passing score in the law and ethics, but they will have to pass it before their next renewal period. Lastly, we have, this really affects all the registrants, the associates. I'm sorry, I should be using the term associates, but so one of the requirements for renewal of an associate license is that you must take a law and ethics exam. Pass or fail, doesn't matter, you just need to participate in the exam. So this waiver we have will allow somebody to actually renew their registration, associate registration, without participating in the exam. If their registration is current and has a current expiration date between March 31st and December 31st. Unfortunately, it's caused some confusion. We've had a lot of people that have been coming back into the system who have a expired registration from last year, and unfortunately they don't qualify for this because they have to have a current registration up until this year.
Hey, Steve,
any questions? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Just a quick question. Actually, I have. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone because my paperwork was on my screen. But so because of the given waivers, and rightfully so, to help our the licensee, the new licensee with their renewals and everything else, are we expecting? I know this is new, so perhaps it's hard to answer this question, but I'm a little bit concerned that once these waves are going to be relieved, whenever that is, that we are going to have an increase of traffic, and are we going to be able to accommodate those requests? Because let's say someone is being postponing, due to COVID and the opportunities we gave, and then all of a sudden the wave is going to be, over. So are we going to be prepared for that? That's all I'm saying, because that will require a lot of the processing, right? I'm just imagining.
What that does, to It's hard to answer that really. When a lot of I mean, when you're talking about, it's kind of the difference between talking about the law and ethics exam or the clinical exam. Clinical exam, people are wanting to get their license. So you're going to have a candidate population that is more wanting to take the test ASAP. We do, like I said, we do have people that do wait till the last minute, wait a year to take their exam. But I think most of, I think the stats show, the Pearson VUE kind of show that most of our traffic is for the clinical exam. So they'll get in there and take it most likely as soon as possible. I'm not, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I think people are still taking exams, so it's not necessarily they're stopping their exam process. I think it'll be okay. I think we'll be okay. Something we'll definitely keep looking at. I'm a stats guy, so I like to look at those things, and especially with exams right now. So, but what I've seen, and it was kind of surprising to me, is that most of the people, at least in the clinical exam, are kind of jumping in there and trying to get their exam done right away. So I'm hoping that we won't have that push at the end. And for the law and ethics exam, it's a little bit different. So it's kind of for renewal. There's a little more leeway, but I think people just want to get it out of the way. And the passing rate for the law and ethics exam hovers around 70 to 80%. So really, that population, I'm not too concerned about like a bottleneck of traffic coming through when it all opens up. That being said, they have a year to take the exam from whenever they're granted, so that will help out too.
Right. I saw John. John, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, especially since you just said you're a stats guy, I wonder if you could also see if there's any way to gather information about the address change piece. A lot of therapists are reporting they're actually closing their physical offices and permanently going to telehealth. And I think in the long run, that will have huge repercussions on the work that we do as the BBS and interacting with our members. So it might be something if there's a way to start exploring that, because people are closing offices for financial reasons, but a lot of people are committing to maybe never reopening those offices. And I think that's just something we might want to be proactive in seeing what that would mean to our membership and to how we interact with them going forward.
Okay, I'm going to probably follow up with you on some questions about that, just to get your ideas a little bit more on that and see what we can do.
Steve, Roseanne had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You pretty much kind of said what I was going to say at the end there. I was just going to throw in response to Max's question about everybody taking the exam at once. I also expect there might be a little bit of a push for people to want to take it, right when the waiver comes off. But like for the registrants, for the people that are getting a second registration number, it's within the next renewal that they have to have taken it. So it should stagger. And for the other ones, it's within 6 months. So again, there might be a little bit of a rush with that, but I expect it to kind of stagger, especially for the law and ethics. I wouldn't think that everybody's going to try to take it on, July 1st or something like that.
Russ and Susan.
So I just had a question. Do you know why or have any ideas why the application increase and the renewal activity increase? Is there any reason why that's increased in the first quarter as opposed to the fourth quarter?
Yeah, it's cyclical. It's a normal cyclical type of thing we see. First of all, it's all graduations, so that those are the registrant applications they're just getting in. And the same for renewal. I think that if you look, it's kind of like, kind of a pattern. Most people come through in May, June, July, and then they follow the same kind of pathway. And so renewals will probably hit that same time too.
Okay, got it.
So it's nothing definitely concerning to us. I know that with COVID and stuff, the only thing it has brought is we have been doing, and I give them kudos every day. The registrants, we are definitely gearing up for next year again. With the idea of seeing how much we can put online to really expedite it even more. And they've been working through, we've been doing a new process, and they've been working with it, and it's kind of setting us up to, next year we can really do more stuff online. So it's been helping.
Thanks, Steve. Susan.
I don't know if this is the, can you hear me, by the way?
Mhm. Yep.
I don't know if this is actually the appropriate place to bring this up, but in your conversation about keeping in contact with all of these people, I'm just wondering, at some point, because of the pandemic, I think this board has a responsibility for communicating to the public, and I'm a public member, that in dealing with the problem of mental health, that there is this huge group of people in California who are qualified to help them with mental health. And I don't know exactly what we should be communicating to all the people that we are communicating with, but we have to communicate something. And we do have a responsibility. And I think we need to figure that out.
No, and I think that's part of our mandate is public protection, but the other part is education and kind of information dissemination there. So you know what, we will be going through a sunset. Not a sunset. We're already doing that, but let me tell you, we're going to go through a planning, doing the strategic plan, and I think that would actually be a great thing to kind of key in on and hone in on is how do we actually promote mental health in California? I mean, unfortunately, it's one of those things on our busy administrative day-to-day, we keep trying to protect California, but I think we're maybe at a point where we can start looking more towards, the promotion of mental health. And we can do simple things already. I think on Facebook, you'll see we kind of like certain pages, mental health pages and such. So, I mean, that's a start, but we can probably do more. So let's bring that up. Yeah.
I just want to second that. I appreciate in the past few years, since the past strategic plan, actually, we have included other tools of communication, like all the social media. We didn't really have that before. And now there is a lot of information going out to the licensee, not just in regards to what is due, what you can do, but also the educational part. I have to say, on a different note, I noticed that usually the disparities of mental health and the stigma, they are not always coming from the lack of knowledge of where mental health provider is, but lack of access. That people can't afford, can't have access to those services, the number one issue, along with what you were saying, Susan, definitely valid, but it's a mixed bag of challenges that I think our strategic plan is a great place for us to tackle those issues directly. So thank you. Is anyone else that I don't see? Otherwise, Steve, maybe you can proceed.
Okay. You think? It doesn't look like it? Okay. Enough of examinations. Done with that. Let's move on. So, enforcement program during the first quarter we had 494 consumer complaints, 368 criminal convictions. A total of 636 cases were closed, and 32 cases were referred to the AG for formal discipline. And as of September 30th, 2020, there were 117 cases pending at the AG's office. We had a total of 9 accusations and 4 statements of issues were filed during the quarter. And the final citations for the first quarter was only 3. That'll be going up once we start getting the citation analysts we have back in, trained and in the position. So there was a total of 32 final disciplinary orders, and the number of days to complete a formal discipline in the first quarter was 487 days. And the performance measure to complete formal discipline was 540 days. That's taking in the AG's time. The average number of days the case is with the Attorney General's office in the first quarter was 373 days. And that statistic is measured from the date the board refers the matter to the AG to the date the case is completed. And the number of average days to complete board investigation in the first quarter was 31 days. And that's the board investigation is the desk investigation that's done by our analysts. Currently, we haven't done any continuing education audits. We have someone that will be filling that position, and we will begin those probably next year again. Outreach activities, we've had quite a few, even though we've been, through video, and I think they've been effective. You can see the list in the board memo. And lastly, the communications report. I think I'm just going to say, Lisa, you've done a great job. Facebook has been an incredible tool, and she's been utilizing it fantastically. We still do Facebook Fridays, and that's where, unfortunately, it's just Lisa right now. Thank you. Talking to in kind of an open forum for registrants, licensees to kind of come in and ask questions about anything. We try to hold them to topic, because if you can see here, we have pretty much most of them have just been question and answers. But we did have one for waiver and exams issues to talk about that. And you can see those were waiver and exam issues. We got 7.4 likes, 4,000 likes, it looks like. So Facebook has been a great tool. And also what we've started on Facebook, and I don't understand it too well, Lisa would have to explain it, but she's also used a component where if people have a question, they can actually, that actually has the answers to questions, where they can actually get that through Facebook also. The other thing that we've done, we've also redesigned the website a little bit to have a section that's filled with FAQs, and we're trying to centralize those more, because I think it's my goal to really, I want to talk to our registrants and licensees, but I know everyone's busy, and I'd rather have them be able to get the answers, on our website without having to do, actually having to call us. But, we're here to, respond by email. So what we're trying to do is get that information out front and center, so that this sometimes complicated process is a little bit more easily accessible. So.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Sorry, just a quick. Do we have a small marketing budget to push Facebook? I know that we have a collection of likes and followers. In the long run, that could be actually saving us some cost. Do we have any budget allocated for that?
I mean, we could always. We could always venture into getting like a contract of some sort with. I mean, that's something we could do. Honestly, I think. I think it's something that staff, luckily, I think we can concentrate staff on really looking at that social media, and which is what we've kind of done with Lisa's position. That's part of half of her duties is really kind of working on that and the communication. It's a big thing for me. And seeing how well it's worked, I definitely want to commit more resources to that. So I think that's what we would look at, how we can utilize our staff, to really work, to really keep that going.
Yeah, don't worry. We won't send you on TikTok, Steve, to do the
no TikTok. I will not. I don't know about TikTok. Well, it's up to the board, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We better focus on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, the other options might come forward, and then, who knows what's happening. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay, Christina, had your hand up.
So I want to just give a big fat kudo to Lisa. If you haven't watched the Facebook Q&A on Friday, go ahead and watch it. She is really absolutely amazing. What an information channel to have that direct question answered, by board staff. And so, I think that is very, very successful, and looking at the number of views, and that's really amazing. So I just really, want to bring up, let's say, how can we further promote it, through the Facebook likes, because I think that is another wonderful direct forum, to reach the people, to bring those new information, new changes, whatever, for the, for the licensees, registrant, or even public, to learn about, what the boards, what's going on with the board. So I just really want to bring it up and see how we can further enhance that function.
Some of the functions, first of all, is, I think in my mantra, and I know my others and staff do this too, is I always divert when people have a question coming in. You always say, okay, answer the question, and then you can get more information by going to, and keep trying to direct people to the resources, to the FAQs online, to the Facebook Fridays. That's been really good. The other thing, and it doesn't have to deal with Facebook and such, we were on the pathway, and we still, it's something that I'm not dropping, but we are looking at producing with the help of DCA. And what's great is you can produce videos with just your phone now, helpful videos and guides. And so I think if we can get that and we can incorporate those and post those on Facebook, and we can really start getting this information going. So I hope that addresses some of that. Roseanne, or I'm sorry.
Yeah. Just to kind of piggyback on Christina's point a little bit, we've also been promoting that at our MFT consortium. So hopefully that'll get a lot of our incoming audience. Those are educators. So hopefully if they pass that along to their students, then the word will spread that way, that we have that available. So we've been trying to do that as well. And I think all of our professional associations are aware now that we have that too. So hopefully they'll let their members know.
Susan?
And then John.
I think that a lot of older people are using Facebook. I hate to tell you this. Younger people, if you talk to any classes in social work today or wherever you talk, you will find they use Instagram and Twitter. They never look at Facebook. So while the Facebook Friday that you're talking about, I'm sure is fabulous for middle-aged, a little bit older people in the profession, but the younger people, Instagram and Twitter. And I think we really do need to devote something to that, because if somebody is feeling like, oh my God, I gotta get help, they're gonna go on Twitter or Instagram. They're not gonna look on Facebook.
Well, yeah, no, and I know that the Facebook platform has kind of been turned off, and I know a lot of the younger crowd are getting turned off from Facebook, but I mean, literally, I think that our Facebook followers are those registrants that are newly graduated, and it's the most people I honestly can say, if we look at our stats from the website, it's the most people that we've ever been in contact with. And it's active. And then the Twitter, only on our Twitter feeds, as opposed to the Facebook followers, which we're almost at 12,000 now, the number of views on Twitter was only 1,200. So we don't get too much on Twitter. And I know that there's a lot of, the things that kind of feeds into that too, is there's a lot of Facebook groups for the registrants, because those are where our most questions and concerns come from, because they're in that process still. There's a lot of Facebook groups out there that kind of feed into that. So, but it's not to say, Instagram is something we should probably look at and see how we can incorporate that, because that would be good.
John.
So Steve, when you and I are talking about the address question, I'm more than happy to make myself available to you and to Kim and to Lisa to talk about social media strategies, because that's something I do really well. So I'm more than happy to be a resource, to have a conversation someday, see what we can do to grow this, because I do think it's an important way to reach our members.
And I've thought about that. Thank you for it.
Wonderful. And anyone, I've seen someone else? No?
I thought Kelly.
Oh, Kelly, was it you? Sorry.
I was just going to offer some kudos to Lisa as well, because looking at the statistics and impressions from her Facebook Fridays, it's outstanding. It's highly progressive. It's leaps and bounds over what the state bar is doing right now, and I think it just makes everything so accessible. I was thinking about something else as well. I think Instagram doesn't quite lend itself to the sort of information-driven stuff that we would be wanting to do, whereas Facebook does. And Facebook, it's very easy to share that information across channels. Twitter is very helpful, but I think Steve is sort of right, is that Facebook really is a wonderful platform for what we're doing. Still waiting to see you on TikTok though.
I don't want to get too much into detail, because I'm sure John will be very helpful with that anyway, but those two platforms can be connected. So once you post on Facebook, it goes to Instagram and vice versa. So it's not a struggle sometimes, but I also wanted to share the kudos to Lisa, because We always talk about the challenges and what you can do better, but I was very impressed with the Friday, and I didn't know if I could say something, so I stay away from making any comments because, but I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people did that too. Lisa, I know you're about to say
Yes.
something.
And I will say, when Christina puts a comment, I get flustered. But I do want to say I'm trying to learn more ways to get the Facebook Fridays to link with Instagram at the same time. I am sending the link afterwards so they can watch it later. And I do the frequently asked questions that Steve talked about. It's like things that I get all the time. How do I know you got my application things? If they click on that when they look at our Facebook homepage, it'll give them the answer right away. And it really frees me up a lot because I get a lot of messages. And that has been very helpful. But yes, I would like to use the Zoom platform where I can bring other team members and we can be together like this and put that on Facebook Fridays too. So anybody can help me with that, I gladly take the help. But I appreciate all the kudos. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lisa. John?
I actually switching from the lovely to something a little more serious. Going back to enforcement program report, it says the days are currently at 487. I was trying to look back and see. To me, that sounds like actually an increase from where we were heading. Kim or Steve, do you know, was that an increase? And if so, what happened, or what do you think might be the reason?
Well, when you're looking at the overall days, it's a snapshot of the cases in that period of time that close. So some of them close very quickly, like our stipulations. Others take a little bit longer because you're waiting for a hearing date. So that can fluctuate. But so it just depends.
I thought in our previous reports, we were down somewhere in the mid threes on days. Is that not correct? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So, but if we had, again, a reason for it going up is if you've had a case that's been at the AGs for a while and then it finally completed, that's going to add more time. And it could have been an older case. It could have been reassigned to a different AG. It could have been a problem getting a hearing date. It could have been that the respondent requested a continuance. So that's going to play into it as well. The number I like to look at is how many days it sits with the AG's office. And that's coming down, which is nice. It's, just slightly over a year, which is, if you think about the 540-day mark, that's not too bad. For overall time periods. Right now, if we take 6 months to complete our end and then it sits a year at an AG's office, we're at 18 months. So that's not too bad.
I appreciate that question, John, also because a lot of people of the public, sometimes, obviously, if you are in a proceeding, that's been taking a year and a half, but you have no idea what it is. Our responsibility on that portion of time and everything else. So sometimes, obviously, we are, made the target of the delay when, there is really a small portion of the time that we are in charge of compares the rest of the proceeding that occurs, which we can't do anything about it. So that's unfortunate, but it's part of the, how the process is.
Did that answer your question, John? Okay.
Okay. Anyone else, or otherwise we'll continue, Steve?
Yeah, just the only thing, the last thing I have to say is I just want to give a shout out to the DCA Call Center. They've been doing really good for us. We switched over to them right before COVID, thank gosh, because they have done a fantastic job of fielding all those calls. Last quarter, we had 7,000 calls that they've answered for us. It's quite a bit, averaging about 100 calls per day. So it's really helped out. So, and that's all I have. That's the rest of it. And then Kim.
That's wonderful. And then we're moving back to Kim.
You might want to ask for public comment.
That would be nice. Thank you, Kim. I apologize, everyone. I'm not trying to cut corners. It's just becoming a long day. So do we have any public comments on all the presentations so far? Steve, do you see anyone?
I don't see anyone. So then with your permission, I'll move on to the personnel report. So we'll keep this Pretty quick. Pleased to report that we have promoted 2 existing BDS staff members to positions of the first promotion. Cynthia comes from our enforcement unit as an investigation analyst, and she will manage the registration, examination, and cashiering units. Our second promotion was Cassandra Kearney, also from the enforcement unit. She was also an investigative analyst. She's been with the board, gosh, longer than both Steve and I. So, but at any rate, she's going to manage our licensing unit. And both ladies hit the ground running, literally, and are doing a fabulous job. We didn't have anyone leave since the last August board meeting, except me, after today. But we still have 8 vacancies, and it's just a matter of us going through the recruitment process and filling those positions. We did have 1 new staff member join us this week in the enforcement unit. Her name was Lisa Santolin, I think is her last name, and she fills the support staff person position in the probation unit, and she started on Monday, so we welcome her to the board. And that's our personnel report. And
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
Any questions in relation to that? I don't see anyone. Okay. And then oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was moving to the strategic plan update.
Yep, that's me again. The update the chart that you typically receive has been updated accordingly with some of the activities. 2 things I'd like to point out. Under the enforcement goal, Steve, or I and Anahita Crawford had a meeting with the referral from Kelly with the ladies there. And that was well received and went really well. And then subsequent to that, Steve and I and Anahita had a meeting, and we talked about how we could achieve this goal. And there's already, we're going to borrow what's already occurring at another board. And Steve's in the process of implementing that. And essentially what that is using subject matter experts to attend all hearings that involve any kind of substance conviction, and using them to educate not only the ALJs, but all the DAGs in attendance too, so that we can get a very consistent baseline in terms of, really trying to increase everybody's awareness about substance abuse. So that'll be starting after the first of the year under Steve's leadership. And pretty excited about that. And that's going very well at the pharmacy board, from what I understand from the AG office. It's well received. Under, where is it? It is, I think, organizational effectiveness or outreach. I'm sorry, it's the outreach. Really excited to share with you that we have several new publications on our website. They're handbooks for our future licensees, and they're for all license types. And Steve has got a picture of the hard copy, but those are were developed and created and revised and updated by Christy Berger, and she did an amazing job with that. And we also published another. When was our last newsletter? That was that? I think that
was
just
September.
September, so it was after the last board meeting, yeah. Right. And Christy has been instrumental in both of those publications, coordinating them, getting them together, working with DCA Print Division, and getting the formatting. And so that's our update on strategic plan. Overall, when you look at this, I think we've done a tremendous amount of work, and it's been good work.
Kim, can I just, and there was one other publication that I think is listed. It's the Self-Empowerment, Choosing a Mental Health Professional. It's had a major update, and it's now published in 13 languages. So very happy about that.
Well done, Christy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina?
Thank you, Max. Kim, I want to really thank you and all the work, for the that piece about educating, the administrative law judges and the AG office. I remember that one is like, hanging in there empty for a very long time because not finding an appropriate way to approach it. So thank you, Kelly, for that wonderful resources. And I think, just from hearing, our insider news that, the education is actually really important just to have that consistency, across all different boards. And so, I'm just really excited for what's coming for, to make that understanding and knowledge a lot more standardized and also help the board member to make good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And if
We're really fortunate, and Anahita was a big part of that, in digging in and doing the research about what really is working. And so we're going to go that route and see how that plans out. I expect it will be quite successful.
That's great. And on that note, Kim, I agree with Christina. And also, I think perhaps we can also redevelop. I know with COVID, we interrupted a lot of things, but finding an opportunity, especially because we have a brand new board, to also bring education to our board without giving things for granted in relations to, for instance, even in all the form of addictions, right? Mm-hmm. And that we legislate or we work on the proceedings. I think it would be important to explore what other aspect of addiction that sometimes we're not so understanding of, besides the typical DUI that we face all the time. So I would like to explore a little bit more of that, so how we can bring that education in the board as well. I can think about a few other sexual addiction and other forms that usually comes also with an additional stigma, and where we need to know more in order to address and make the right decision as well. So I kudos for exploring that as well. So thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. Steve, are you taking notes? Okay. Are there any questions on the strategic plan? Any other questions?
Can I just give real quick kudos to Christy? You've done a fantastic, just an amazing job at these publications. There, if you haven't seen them, I think they're online. You should see them. They look great. It's the best publications we've had in quite a long time. And the newsletter is just still great. So thank you, Christy.
Thank you so much.
The new strategic plan is upcoming probably next, fall 2021?
I've already actually talked with Solid, and we're looking at scheduling that. I'm looking for, not fall. We're looking probably a little bit earlier to get started.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And then one other piece, Steve, do you want to just give a quick update on the sunset?
Oh, yeah, that might be a good idea. Huh? So the sunset hearings, because of COVID, were delayed a little bit. And we just got word yesterday that they're actually going to be holding the hearings on November 18th for our board. So November 18th between 9 and 12, that's when we are supposed to go up for our hearing. What that means is we do have to work this week on answering some questions for them, supplemental issues, just kind of an update to what we originally presented. It might be additional statistics and just updates on some of the legislation that has gone through or that we spoke to originally in the sunset report. So November 18th, that is our hearing. Max and Christina, I'll be talking with you a little bit more. And yeah, there we go.
Wonderful. Exciting. It seems yesterday we're already here and a new one. Okay, I believe, Steve, if you're okay with that, Kim, if you're okay with, we're concluding that agenda item. We're moving forward to Roseanne for the Policy and Advocacy Committee recommendations. Hello, Roseanne.
Hello. Yes. So my first item today that I'll be discussing is proposed legislation that are technical changes. We kind of group these all together every year. This year, we're looking at technical changes being able to either be run in the omnibus bill proposal that the Senate Business and Professions Committee runs every year, or possibly the board's sunset bill, which will run next year and extend, hopefully, our sunset date. we had kind of an unconventional year last year where the legislature had to shut down and shorten its session unexpectedly due to COVID. And therefore, we were not able to run an omnibus bill with a lot of our technical changes in it. So you're seeing a lot of material before you. It's kind of grouped into 4 categories. I have a category of new things that have come up that staff has suggested or stakeholders suggested that have not been seen or approved by the board yet. I have some fee-related amendments that were part of the board's fee bill, but they were more technical, not they were just cleanup, like deleting some sections, changing some cleanup language. So they were approved as part of the fee bill, but were not able to run as part of that bill proposal. I have technical amendments approved by the board last year, and then cleanup amendments made for consistency with AB 2138, which talked about when the board could deny or not deny a license or registration. So we need to make some cleanups due to the passage of that bill. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. The Policy and Advocacy Committee considered this at its October meeting and discussed all of these items. I'm going to stop after each item because there are so many of them, and Christina's going to read a motion and allow discussion. So if you have any questions, like I said, I'm going to go kind of quickly. There's some explanation in your packet. If you have any questions, you can ask me or feel free to discuss. So I'm going to start with item number 1 under the new amendments not approved by the board. And this has to do with associates in telehealth as listed in Business and Professions Code section 2290.5. And this is basically a recommendation to include associate clinical social workers and associate professional clinical counselors in the definition of healthcare providers who may provide telehealth in Business and Professions Code section 2290.5. Technically, there is a Business and Professions Code section 23.8, which includes associates already, but it's very indirect. And since MFT associates are specifically listed in 2290.5, we get the question a lot is why are associate social workers and associate clinical counselors treated the same? So what we're doing is proposing to treat them the same and list them here. So I'll open it up for discussion.
I don't see anything?
No?
Okay. Okay, let's move on.
So we want to go through with the motion, and that's going to be, we kind of have a standard motion. Christina, do you want to read that, or do you want me to?
Read the motion. Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal. Who would like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Max Disposti?
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich?
Yes.
Susan Friedman? Susan, please unmute. Thank you. All right. Dr. Diana Herwick?
Yes.
Chris Jones?
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe?
Yes.
John Stovek?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Moving on, the next item number 2 has to do with fictitious business names. And there's some sections in our law that discuss this, and it uses a little bit, very slightly inconsistent language. So what we're doing is we're asking to amend three sections you see listed there, 4980.46 and 4998.2 for LCSWs, to use the word that instead of which when talking about fictitious business names that are false, misleading, or deceptive. We also want to add the statute for LEP licensing law, 4989.47, because it is not included. Again, this is for consistency, so all of our 4 practice acts have the exact same language that is exactly identical and that are treated the same. So I will open it for discussion.
Ensure that everyone, I don't see anyone.
Okay. The motion is direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal. Who would like to make that motion? Oh, Kim.
You need to ask for public comment. Oops.
Yes. Well, after even before or after the motion is made, public comments. I didn't see anyone raised their hands or their phone, or just double checking. Okay, we have
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Fine.
Anyone else would like to second that? John?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? We're good to go. Christine?
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to item number 3, clarification of frequency of renewal fees. Right now, and in the long-standing past, the board's license renewal fees are paid every 2 years, and registration renewal fees are paid annually. So we want to amend certain sections in law. There's certain sections that don't say this in places where it could, and for clarity, we want to add to these sections to specify that associate registrations are renewed annually and licenses are renewed every 2 years. So I will open that up for discussion.
So just for clarity, sorry, Roseanne, we are not changing the frequencies. It's more about
No.
making sure
We're just adding it to where it should say that in law, so that when you read it, it's really obvious that it's annual or biennial. It's been annual and biennial for years and years and years.
Right. I just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Okay, members from the public as well. Any comments? Okay, perhaps we can move a motion. Anyone?
I'll provide the motion. Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
I'll move.
Anyone seconds?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ross. We can go to vote. Any other comments? So, okay, we don't have anyone.
Okay. Here's the vote. Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to item number 4, email address requirements for applicants, registrants, and licensees. Several other boards over the past several years have added requirements to their law that applicants, registrants, and licensees provide the board with a current email address if they have one. We think that would be really useful, a requirement for us to have as well. It would allow us to communicate information to licensees and registrants about law changes and other important information that they need to know, rather than hoping that they sign up for our email listservs or our social media pages. In addition, our exam vendor communicates directly with applicants in the exam process via email. And so it's really important that we have a current email address for these applicants so that they can receive their timely updates about their exam status. So we're proposing to add Business and Professions Code 4990.07 to the board's general administrative code sections, requiring that all applicants and registrants and licensees who have an email address, so they're not required to get one if they don't, but if they have an email address, to provide it to the board by July 1, 2022. The language also prohibits the board from disclosing the email address to the public, so there's no worry there that we would disclose it. It's purely would be for our internal uses only.
John?
Does the language also prohibit any vendors or third-party people who work with BBS from sharing those emails?
It would only be provided to the board. So I don't believe any vendor fee. It would only be between them and the board. There wouldn't be any third parties accessing it. We wouldn't share it with any third parties. It says specifically that it shall be considered confidential and not subject to public disclosure.
Okay. I just want to make sure that any vendors or contractors that the BBS may be working with are also under this privacy blanket, just because I think it's really important to protect anyone's email address.
Roseanne, do you think that language will suffice, that will cover that?
I believe it will. Sabina, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
Oh, where is Sabina?
I might have.
We're not considering in general that the email address would be part of a public disclosure, John. It's not part of the address of record. So under the law, under the BMP code, we're not required to release anything but the address of record.
So the email came, just for clarification, for what I understood even in our P&A committee, it goes under that protections. Like for us disclosing an address of our licensee, that would be absolutely a breach of confidentiality.
Yeah, I believe so. And I would be hesitant anyway. And I'm reasonably certain staff would be as well. So, if we're not required under law to disclose it, then we would not do so.
Right.
And I don't believe that we are.
I see Sabina, just in case she wants to chime in on this. Sabina? And if you can.
No, I don't. I'm not, hold on, Bloody. Sorry, I'm on. I don't. I'm not seeing anything like Kim said. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I know everybody can hear me. I was getting blank stares back from Kim. All right. Oh, you were frozen. Okay, hold on.
Oh, that's why.
Sorry. So I'm good with what Kim said.
Yeah, we don't provide the information that needs
Sorry.
any vendors. I mean, it would be strictly confidential within our system.
Perfect. So any other comments or questions? Members from the public? I don't see anyone. Okay, Christina, would you like to read the motion without making one?
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
We can, other conversations, doesn't look like we have anyone else. We can move to the vote.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
It looks like Susan has dropped off the Zoom.
Okay.
I'll continue with the vote and hopefully she'll jump in at the end.
Do we have a quorum without Susan? Just for, we don't?
Oh, yeah, we do.
We do. Okay.
Dr. Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
No.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
One more time, Susan Friedman, is she in? I don't see her. Okay, motion carries.
All right, item number 5. This is an item that we discussed at Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting. However, we kind of had some a slight change of mind in internal discussions since then. We had previously asked the Policy and Advocacy Committee to consider adding a section to the board's licensing law, allowing the board the ability to waive statutes and regulations during a state of emergency if the board believes the waiver will aid for public protection or patient care. So we heard that at the Policy and Advocacy meeting, and they directed to bring it to the board for discussion. DCA has been delegated the ability to issue waivers to the director, and that process has been moving forward as the emergency extends. They've been really good about extending our waivers out. Though this might be something we want to consider in the future, kind of our discussions internally is that it might be better to hold off. The waiver process that DCA is implementing is still ongoing and evolving as everybody learns, how to do the waivers and kind of the path going forward. So we feel like this might be good to consider in the future. It might at this point still be premature for the board to pursue its own waiver process while this state of emergency continues on longer than expected. So staff recommends that the board may wish to consider deferring this item until the current state of emergency has ended. So we can kind of regroup and see what worked and what didn't.
So can I just talk?
Yes.
Okay. So Roseanne, so that would be a deviation from, what we discussed in the P&A meeting.
Yes.
And so, so I just want to know that if, let's say the board vote to set it aside, when we basically just parking lot this, this particular section and just don't touch with it and not include that in that legislative package, right?
Right. That's what would happen if the board.
That's basically is like, we can vote to remove this discussion, but then it doesn't really affect, the introduction of the legislative package.
Right. That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you, Roseanne.
Russ?
So I'm a little not clear about why would we not want to move forward with this if some of the language saying how having to go to the director takes a lot more time and there's multiple layers to go through. So why wouldn't we want to be able to streamline that?
So in response to that, it's executive orders come from the governor's office, and the governor's office is the one that gave the delegated authority to the DCA director to do the waivers initially. And so, when that happened, we had this onslaught of everybody wanting to do waivers. So you had 40 boards and bureaus trying to run it through the process. And that's where some of the delays really occurred. Now it's happening since, that initial flood of waiver requests has passed. Proactively, what DCA is doing is looking ahead about 60 to 45 days at the extensions, contacting the boards. Do you want to extend that? We say yes. And within the next 2-3 weeks, we see that the waiver has been approved. So right now, I think the process is working pretty well. Initially, like everybody else, we're scrambling to deal with COVID. I think waiting and seeing how this plays out through COVID is probably a good idea. And then in a few years, revisiting, the topic. That's why we're making that recommendation now.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Just for the sake of clarity, for my understanding too, is that in case of an emergency, let's say a fire develops in a specific area, so waivers needs to be so the executive order will take care of that for that specific region without even our own intervention.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not like we're leaving people not knowing what to do. They will be covered by the governor executive order. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we can continue to make waiver requests throughout this process, but I think the ones that we have in place are really the more critical, necessary ones and don't compromise our consumer protection mandate or any kind of licensure standards and requirements. I think we're in a good spot.
Perfect. Anyone else? So Roseanne, we are not voting on this, right?
No, Sabina, do we need a motion on this, or do we just say that it's tabled?
Oh, she just turned it off. I think you can non-adopt the recommendation and remove it. No, she's saying no. She's shaking her head now.
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute. What? I
couldn't. That motion.
So do we, for this item that we're not going to proceed with, do we need to vote to remove it?
No.
Okay. Just table
it. We're not going to take a motion on that item.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, then I will move on. Let's see, item number 6, correction of maximum fee amount. Okay, so this, I'm going to set this up a little bit more than the other ones just to make sure that it's clear. The board successfully pursued an increase in the licensing fees this past legislative session. That fee increase is effective at its base amounts beginning January 1, 2021. At the time of the fee increase, a base amount was determined based on a fee audit. And then to allow room for future fee increases without running legislation, whenever we do fee increases in statute, there's always a base, which is what we're charging now, and then a maximum or a ceiling, which is what we could charge later, subject to the regulation process. So if we wanted to raise fees in the future up to that ceiling, we would not have to run legislation, which is in most of the time more difficult to do. You have to find somebody willing to carry a bill. We would be able to run regulation. So it would still have to go through the public comment process. The board would still have to approve it, but a fee hike could be done through the regulatory process. So that's pretty standard through DCA with all fees. There's usually a base and a ceiling. We don't believe that we're going to need the maximum fee amounts for many, many years. But we discovered an error when we did the calculation of maximum fees for the LCSW application for licensure fee. Across all license types, the current base fee for the application for licensure fee is established at $250. To determine the maximum fee, it should have been doubled to $500. And this was done for LMFT, LEP, and LPCC license types. But when we did it for LCSWs, it was erroneously not doubled and set at $400. So that's the maximum. Increasing this lower fee of $400 to the maximum fee of $500, which is what it should have been, would have no effect currently on the LCSW application for licensure fee, which is currently established and it's going to stay at $250. However, having the maximum fee ceiling set incorrectly too low for error could have an effect years down the road if applications for the other licensing types are set at $500 and LCSW application fees can only be raised to $400 because that's the ceiling. If this hypothetically were to happen, not saying it's going to for many, many years, it would create an unequal fee across the licensure types, and it could require the board to pursue legislation in the future when otherwise it would not have been needed. So what we're suggesting today or recommending today is to correct the error in Business and Professions Code section 4996.3A3 to have the maximum LCSW application fee set at $500 instead of $400. Again, it doesn't change anything today, and board action would be needed. Board approval would be needed before any fees were increased in the future. But this would make it consistent with the other maximum fees for the other three license types for that fee type. So I will open that up for discussion.
Anyone else? Members of the public? Okay, Christina, would you like to read a motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
I'll move.
Christina Wong is moving. Who will second?
I'll second.
Kelly will second. Susan, I'm sorry, I missed you. Okay, I think we, any other comments? Okay, we're good. Yes, Christina, we can go to the vote. There are no other comments.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 7, renewal of suspended license and reinstatement of revoked license. We are proposing to add 2 sections to LCSW law regarding renewal of a suspended license and reinstatement of a revoked license, so that this process is clear for LCSWs and consistent with the law that's already, with the wording or the statute that's already in the law for the board's LMFT and LPCC license types. For some reason, these 2 sections just aren't in LCSW law, so we're proposing to add them. We would also make some minor amendments to the LEP law so that the wording is consistent with the corresponding sections in the other board's license types. So it's just really important to have everything worded exactly the same so that when we send out letters of enforcement or anything that we're not, that all of our licensing statutes match and everybody's treated the same. So that's the proposal there.
Okay. Do we have any questions, comments? Members of the public? Steve, can you see? Okay. Christina, would you like to read the motion, please?
The motion would be direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Thank you. John?
I'll move.
John moves. I can second. And any more discussion? Susan? Susan, I'm sorry, I saw you raising your hands. Maybe.
Oh, a second, I was just a second.
Oh, there was a second from me, but I'm more than happy for you to move as a second.
It's not important.
Okay, then we have John made the move the motions. I'll second, and Christina, we can go for the vote.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Hurwitz,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovet,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, moving on to item number 8. We had a bill this year, SB 855, that it's pretty exciting. It's an update to California's 1999 Mental Health Parity Act. And the governor signed this SB 855 bill. It requires all health plans and insurers that provide hospital, medical, or surgical coverage to cover all medically necessary treatment of mental health and substance use disorders under the same terms and conditions as applied to other medical conditions. So it's a big update to the older Mental Health Parity Act that was in place. The bill contains a definition of a healthcare provider in it. And the board had considered it, and we had kind of had some feedback on the definition of a healthcare provider in two sections, 1374.72 of the Health and Safety Code, and there's sort of twin sections in the bill. There's also 10144.5 for insurance code. And so the definition of the healthcare provider, the board had ultimately decided after some discussion to request that all associates be added to the definition of a healthcare provider, but that trainees either be removed or clarified that they are under supervision of a licensed person for purposes of the bill. So ultimately, the associates were all amended in, so that's good. But the author was ultimately, there was some amending of the bill at the very end, but the author ultimately was not able to make these amendments in time at the legislative session. There was a number of shutdowns, and so there were some issues getting everything in and done all on time in terms of the amendments. So they weren't able to make the late amendments that the board had requested, but they suggested that the board pursue them this year as part of the Health Committee's omnibus bill this coming year. So based on what the board had wanted and what got chaptered or signed into law, staff recommends pursuing an amendment to the definition of a healthcare provider as follows to address the board's concerns. Number one, we would recommend deleting professional clinical counselor trainees from the definition. They cannot count pre-degree hours, and so they're not necessarily under the supervision of a licensed professional like MFT trainees are. And then number two, we would continue to include marriage and family therapist trainees in the definition, but we would clarify that they are performing activities and services as part of their supervised course of study as set out in Business and Professions Code section 4980.42. In order to count pre-degree hours, MFT trainees must be supervised by a licensed person who meets the board's supervisor qualifications. So that is the proposal to pursue in the Health Committee's omnibus bill this year. I'll open up for discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any questions? Kim?
Not me. Jen Alley has her hand up from camp.
Oh. I missed that.
Oh, and
Please go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say that we're okay with that change to the MFT trainee, and we appreciate the board's thoughtful discussion during the last board meeting when this came up during the policy and advocacy committee, and then with legislative staff. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that hard work by the board staff and appreciate and acknowledge the discussion and thoughtfulness of the board. So thank you. We support this, obviously.
Thank you, Jen.
Leah Brew has her hand up.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Hello. I just want to confirm, does this mean that trainees in, or I should say pre-degree individuals for the LPCC path would not be able to work with these groups? Is that probably where that's headed?
It means that they would not be, for purposes of the bill, yes, they would not be considered under the definition of a healthcare provider because they are not necessarily required to be supervised by a licensed person.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other hands up. Members of the public again, just making sure I don't miss anyone. Okay, Christina, if you would like to read us the motion.
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
I'll move.
I'll move the motion.
I move.
I have Disposti and Wong, who wants it?
Oh, who's the other one?
It was me, but
Oh,
I'm only the chair. It doesn't matter.
I will go first. You can go second.
I can go.
Okay.
And any more before we go to the vote? Just a last appeal for members of the public or anyone else. Any other comments?
Nope, don't see any.
Max, this is Kelly. I just wanted to let you know my screen went dark, so I'm switching computers, but I'm still on. I can hear you on Bluetooth.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for letting us know. I was looking for you. I thought it was me.
I'm still here, but I don't know where I am.
Okay, then. We're all lost somewhere. Okay, Christina, if you don't mind to do the count. Thank you.
Max Disposti?
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich?
Yes.
Susan Friedman?
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick?
Yes.
Chris Jones?
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe?
Yes.
John Sobeck?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, I am going to move on to the second kind of set of our technical amendments. These are fee-related amendments that were previously approved by the board to run in last year's fee increase bill, but because they were minor and non-substantive, they weren't as urgent as the actual fee increases, so they did not get run. So the first one is the authority to charge continuing education provider fees. The board no longer has the authority to approve continuing education providers. That authority was removed in January when the new January 2015 when the new continuing education regulations became effective, and the board delegated the authority to approve CE providers to designated approval agencies. And so the language that giving us the authority to approve CE providers is obsolete and no longer needed. So we're proposing to delete it.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any questions? Anyone from the public?
I don't see anyone.
Thank you, Kim. Christina, if you would like to read the motion?
I just want to make a clarification. Roseanne, we are talking about authority to charge continuing education provider fees?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm on the right page.
Thank you, Christina.
The motion is to direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Wonderful.
I'll move. You go, Max.
Okay, I'll move the motion. Anyone else?
I'll second.
Okay, Christina, second, and more discussion. No, I don't see anyone from the public as well. We can go for the vote.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Erlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Hurwitz,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, moving on to item number 2 under this section, renewal of expired license and reinstatement of license and cumulative fees. The board does not charge accrued renewal or delinquency fees for expired or revoked license. However, LPCC and LEP statutes are written to permit this. At the same time, LMFT and LCSW statutes are actually not written to permit this. This inconsistency was actually highlighted and brought to our attention with AB 544, which ran in 2019. It proposed, among other things, prohibiting boards under DCA from requiring a person to pay accrued and unpaid renewal fees to reinstate an expired license or registration. And it proposed making this correction in LPCC and LEP language. AB 544 died for other reasons, but it highlighted that we needed to make this change. So we wanted to go ahead and do so for consistency so that we have the same wording across all statutes and so that it's clear that we do not charge accrued fees. And so with that, I'll open it up to discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. It seems really clear, but if there are any questions, members of the public?
I don't see any.
Wonderful. Christina, thank you.
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Great. We have a motion. We don't have a motion. We have a presentation of the motion. Anyone would like to move?
I move.
Okay, John is moving the motion.
I'll second.
And Chris is seconding the motion. Thank you, Chris. And Chris, any more discussion? Doesn't look like. Okay, Christina?
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Erlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Hurwitz,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, and then finally under this section, item number 3, repeal Business and Professions Code section 4999.122, licensed professional clinical counseling startup funds. This is an obsolete code section. It's no longer needed. The LPCC license type was established via SB 88 in 2010. It allowed the board to basically use its reserve funds to start up the LPCC program while it was waiting to collect licensing fees. The LPCC program has been operational now for several years and the section is no longer necessary and it's obsolete. So we propose deleting it.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any questions?
I see no questions.
You see a question or no?
No, I don't see anyone.
Okay. Thank you, Cam. No one from the public? Christina, if you would like to read the motion.
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Okay, Christina, just to, there was a breaking up feedback. Well, I think we heard the motion, just to let you know, there was some freezing going on over there.
Would you like me to reread the motion?
Just go ahead, just for the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christina. Anyone moving the motion?
Move.
Second.
Christina moves. I heard a second, but I couldn't.
Ross.
Oh, Ross. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ross. Any discussion? Okay, wonderful. Christina?
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Erlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to the next kind of set of amendments. Amendments approved by the board in 2019, 2020. So the board has seen these before and approved them. However, for full transparency, since it's been a year, and also because we have a large number of new board members, we wanted to bring them back for an additional approval before they move forward or additional consideration. So I'm going to go through those now. The first item has to do with professional corporations. There's some language that in our licensing laws that talks about professionals who can provide professional services in a professional corporation. It lists which license types may be officers or directors or employees rendering professional services. However, this is duplicate language. It's also in section 13401.5 of the Corporations Code. That's kind of where that language is established by the legislature and sort of lives. The legislature changes that section occasionally in the Corporations Code, changes the mix of professionals and sometimes the names of what those professionals are called. So for example, midwives and naturopathic doctors are more recent additions. And because there's a lot of changes frequently to these lists of professions, our licensing law hasn't kept up. And it's really probably better if we don't list them there and just refer it to, or just leave that reference in the Corporation Code, because that's really what the law is, rather than trying to keep up with it. So we recommend striking the list of professions in 4980.5, 4987.5, 4998, and 499.123 of the Business and Professions Code, as it's duplicated. It's already duplicated in the Corporations Code. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you, Roseanne. Do we have any questions, comments?
I do
from the
not see
public?
any.
Okay. Christina?
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Perfect. Anyone would like to move a motion?
I'll move.
Don't be shy, Christina.
I said I move.
That's
I'm
why I
just trying to speed it along.
Who seconds?
I'll second.
Okay, Susan seconds. Any discussion? Members of the public? Okay, Christina, thank you. Go ahead.
Max Disposti?
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich?
Yes.
Susan Friedman?
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick?
Yes.
Chris Jones? Chris Jones?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Yes. I hit the wrong button.
I got it. Kelly Ranasinghe?
Yes.
John Sovek?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, moving on to number 2, renumbering. Business and Professions Code 4980.43.3 contains a numbering error in subdivision C. The two criteria listed as 1 and 2 should instead be labeled as subdivisions A and B. So we're just proposing to renumber those two subdivisions in this proposal.
Okay, thank you, Roseanne. I'm expecting a long conversation around this.
I'm really respecting someone's attention to detail in this moment, and that's all I have to say.
I totally agree, John. I absolutely agree. How numbers really make a difference, or letters in this case too. Okay, I don't see any comments. Christina, if you would like to read the motion.
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Thank you. I like to see that everything we've done all day at the end of the day becomes almost a struggle, right? Okay, we're almost there. Any additional comments? None from the public. anyone would like to move a motion?
I'll
Okay.
move.
I'll move.
Okay, John, thank you.
John, move a motion. Second, who would like to second?
I'll second.
Susan. Wonderful. No more discussion. I don't see anyone raising their hands. Christina, let's go for the vote.
Okay. Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Hurwitz,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sobek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to item 3. This is actually one that the staff is recommending deferring to the telehealth committee because it really highlights how different perspectives and happenings can change in a year. We were originally proposing that the definition of 1 hour of direct supervisor contact, it's right now a specified amount of face-to-face contact between one supervisor and their supervisee. We were proposing previously, before COVID, proposing clarifying that needed to be in person. That doesn't seem so appropriate anymore. It seems like it warrants further discussion before that change is considered further. So we have the telehealth committee starting up in January, recommending including this item as part of a broader discussion and not making any changes right now to this.
Thank you, Roseanne. And we, in the discussion of this portion, it's really a fascinating conversation because this is going to go beyond COVID and how practicing is changing along the line. So I think the telehealth committee will be the right place to address all the possible challenges and, really exploring everything without jumping into irrational conclusions. So do we need to vote for this one, Roseanne? No, we don't.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, and but we do. If there are any questions or any comments from the public.
I don't see any comments from the public, no.
Okay, then we can move forward. Thank you, Roseanne.
Okay, moving on to item 4, notice to clients about filing a complaint. Last year via AB 630, the board amended the law to require unlicensed or unregistered therapists in exempt settings to provide their clients with information about where to file a complaint about their therapist. In looking at that bill, toward the end of the legislative session, the Senate Business and Professions Committee suggested some additional language that also be included. Adding this language would provide a consumer who's unsure about whether their therapist was licensed or registered with an additional resource in the board's contact information to call and check. And so they agreed to let the bill go through because it was pretty late to make amendments, but they asked that we consider adding this statement later. So we're proposing to amend this statement into 4980.01, 4996.14, and 4999.22. I'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any discussion or comments?
Roseanne, I have a question.
Yes.
Please, John.
I'm a little confused because if my memory serves me correctly, with both trainees and associates, they are required as part of a first interaction with a client to identify where they are in their licensure status.
Yes.
So what is this doing in addition to that?
So it's basically if somebody's seeing, this is for people who are seeing basically unlicensed or unregistered therapists. If for some reason the therapist doesn't say if they're unlicensed or registered, even though a trainee or a intern or an associate is supposed to identify themselves, or if the person just can't remember and is not sure and wants to check with the board, it just basically says, hey, here's some additional contact information. If you're not sure if your therapist is licensed or registered, you can call up and the board will assist you, or you can look it up on the board's website if that person is licensed or registered. That way they can know.
Yeah, if I remember well in the conversation, we were considering big and smaller settings where, because in different circumstances, sometimes the consumer doesn't know what to do or how to, and so forth. Yeah.
in most, and hopefully in a perfect world, everybody's going to identify themselves if they're licensed and registered and follow the law. But just in case for some reason that doesn't happen, or if the client is just not sure and they're seeing an unlicensed person that gives them this, then they have that board resource.
And also could weed out those circumstances where people are self-proclaiming to be, you know, anyone can be a counselor, but then, you know, there is not that understanding from the public, a counselor, a therapist, a clinical worker. So I think that might help a little bit to clarify and, you know, the possible misunderstanding or self-proclaiming, right? Christina.
I also want to add that, you know, for the trainees, they're basically students and then they have a supervisor. And so, you know, by their practice, they also should be identifying themselves to the clients that I am a student and my supervisor is so-and-so. That's the ideal world. And so, yes, they may not be the one who are under the jurisdiction of BBS yet. You know, I think the most important thing is to let them know that, you know, there is an avenue, you know, to make a complaint. And, you know, so that was, you know, so that would satisfy, you know, the need, you know, for the consumer protection.
Any more comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Christina, if you can read the motion, thank you.
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Thank you, Christina.
I move.
Christina Wong is moving. Anyone else would like to second?
Second.
Who said that? I'm sorry.
Chris.
Chris. Thank you, Chris. Sorry. Okay. Christina? Oh, sorry. I don't see any other comments. Okay. Christina?
Okay. Max Disposti?
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich?
Yes.
Susan Friedman?
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick?
Did you hear me?
Doctor, I think you
One more
froze.
time, Diana.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Chris Jones?
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe?
Yes.
John Sovek?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on. We're still talking about the required notice to consumers required by AB 630, but we're kind of talking about a different aspect of it now. That required notice to consumers is currently required to be given to a therapist's clients prior to initiating psychotherapy services. The board, when discussing the above language that was just approved, a concern came up among stakeholders that in a crisis situation, if somebody's getting a new client, that might not be the very best time to give that notice. So the staff is proposing amendments to require the notice to be provided prior to initiating psychotherapy services or as soon as practically possible thereafter. We also suggest requiring that the delivery of the notice to clients be documented. As soon as practically possible language is similar to language used in the law regarding mandated reporting of child abuse and elder independent adult abuse. And also along those same lines, in terms of requiring documentation, telehealth consent is currently required to be documented. So we're not doing anything new and groundbreaking there, just a couple of safeguards to make sure everything is documented properly and to make sure that therapists have a little bit of leeway in an emergency situation to not have to stop everything and provide the notice.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any comments? John.
I know we're so close, but these things are important. I want to double check too, because in the mandated reporting, there are actually time guidelines plus as soon as practically possible. So I'm wondering, do we need to be careful with that too, to put in some type of time frame with the as soon as practically possible?
I think for like a child abuse situation, I think because it's the law that has to be reported, it seems like that there should be a minimum deadline. In this case, where it's providing a notice, we're still requiring that it be done. I would think, in my opinion, as soon as practically possible is reasonable. It's not about making a mandated report or something, but we're still requiring that it has to be done, and they need to document that they did it. We can definitely have a discussion on. I think that this is a little bit different case, but you can open that up to discussion.
So the way I interpreted this in our conversation at PNA was that exactly for what John was saying in relations to, for instance, child abuse. Obviously, in those circumstances, if you have a situation that you need to report as soon as, that means it's vital, right? You could put someone else's life in danger. In this situation is assisting someone right away, but perhaps they are not in a mental state to be able to confirm the disclosure of, presented, and so that we can actually then inform in the right times that, obviously not a week after. I don't know if it's okay to establish a time frame, because sometimes, that could be a challenge, but definitely what makes sense. It wouldn't make sense if someone is waiting a week to report something like that, right? That was my understanding, but I wonder if more is needed. Yes, John.
Sabina.
Oh, and Kelly after, yeah.
Sabina, just a question too. Sorry, let me pull up the phrasing. Is as soon as the practical possible thereafter, are there legal loopholes in that could bite us in the end if there are disciplinary actions that came up?
I think yes and no. I think that as with every discipline case we have, everything is on a case-by-case basis. And I don't know if you'd rather use some kind of word about reasonable or something, because then what's reasonable? If you have if you're seeing somebody in an emergency situation, when is that possible? When is practical to give that to them? Do you want to not, give them help if they're not going to sign it immediately before? I don't know. It's hard. But I think we can't leave it out there though too long.
Yeah. Well, I think that in this case, practically, it gives them some discretion to do it, that it's reported, but they're still required to do it. So if we get a complaint that it wasn't done, then we could look at the circumstances.
Kelly?
So I would just say this, is that the mandated reported provisions inside the penal code, I believe it's 36 hours, but they are functioning for a different purpose. That is to notify law enforcement and to kickstart a law enforcement investigation. The notice provisions of our complaint are designed to, it's substantively different. So we're sort of comparing two different things. I would suggest, that the language as driven gives the therapist that sort of broadness in order to make his own decision, because if you maintain that 36-hour thing inside mandated reporter, that person might still be in crisis. So I would just, I think the language as drafted appears to be acceptable.
Christina?
So I want to also, draw the attention to, the crisis situation. That can also include a lot of the clients who are, say, like in a 5150 situation. And so, so I think that is really about the reason, why we think that, that instead of at the first appointment, which was kind of like the initial talking, and then we change it to prior, change it to as soon as possible, just to take that consideration of some of the circumstances that it's not able to, for the clients, for the therapist to actually, inform, the client how to file a complaint. And so I think that is a good compromise in the sense that we try to, address the timing issue and also take that, emergency situation into consideration.
Anyone else from the board first? Any members of the public? Any comments?
Dr. Brew has a comment.
Dr. Brew?
To piggyback off of what Christina said, crisis situations are different than psychotherapy. You're not doing the same kind of work in the first place. That's why Red Cross folks can do that work and not necessarily be licensed in that particular state. Secondly, the whole purpose of this is if somebody makes a complaint and it needs to go up to the board, eventually they'll get there. Then we have the SMEs, I guess, to evaluate what is a standard of practice, and also the board members who are licensees looking at each case. So it seems really safe to me and reasonable to use this language. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Brew. Any other comments from the public?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, if there's nothing else from the board, Christina, if you would like to read the motion.
To direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
I'll move.
Christina moves. I'll second. Any more discussion? None from the public.
Okay, here's a vote. Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diane Kerwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving right along. Item number 6 has to do with petitions for reinstatement or modification of penalty. The board's legal counsel has recommended a couple of clarifying provisions regarding procedure for petitioning to terminate probation early or modifying a penalty. Specifically, subdivision B currently specifies timeframes after which a petition can be filed with the board. Until recently, the board operated under the assumption that the time during which a probation is tolled also counts toward the specified timeframes. An administrative law judge, however, has challenged this assumption, stating that it's incorrect. So staff wishes to clarify that the timeframes exclude any periods of probation tolling. Also, subdivision C states that a petition may be heard either by the board or the board can assign the petition to an administrative law judge. However, the next subdivision, subdivision D, implies that the petitioner has some say in who does hear the case, stating the petitioner may request that the board schedule the hearing on the petition for a board meeting at a specific city where the board regularly meets. The intent of this is likely to provide that a petitioner can request the case be heard, for example, if they live in Southern California at a Southern California board meeting. But it's also possible that it inadvertently implies that a petitioner can request that the board hear a case instead of an administrative law judge and vice versa. So we're proposing to amend subdivision B to exclude periods of probation tolling from the required time frames on or after which a petition can be filed, and also amend subdivision D to clarify that a petitioner can only request a hearing location if the board is hearing the case. I will open that up for discussion.
I have a question.
Thank you, Roseanne. Kelly, go ahead.
Sabina, assuming that correction is made, is there still a mechanism for which like a petitioner can request a venue like in Southern California versus Northern California? You're muted.
Sorry, I was, can you hear me now? Yeah, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have a lot of technical difficulties today. Yes, I mean, they can always, originally and normally, I'll say normally, we alternate on locations where we have our board meetings, and they can obviously request to be put on the list to be heard in Southern California versus Northern California. You know,
okay.
That's always standard.
Okay.
Any more questions from the board? any members of the public?
I do not see any members of the public raising their hand. With no comments.
Wonderful. Okay, so Christina, would you like to read the motion?
Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Who's seconding? Sorry, Ross.
Ross.
Thank you, Ross. Any more questions, comments, members of the public? None.
No comments.
Christina.
All right, Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Hurwitz,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Roseanne. Just, I know we have some time to go, right? Is it maybe 5 minutes break, something that everyone would like? Yes?
Sure.
I see thumbs up. 5 or 10?
Okay.
5 minutes? 5 minutes. Okay, we'll be reconvening at 3:45.
You can move
Looks
it.
like
Yeah, you might have to move the camera a little bit.
we're done, John.
Hey, Max, I have a procedural question.
Yes.
Do these all have to be approved individually, or can we batch things? Going
No,
off the
so-
advice.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, of course. I mean, I'm not alone. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. We originally, so the Policy and Advocacy Committee, did all the heavy lifting with this. It was very confusing. It was a long discussion. And so we tackled each one of them separately. If you want to, I know Roseanne also has them in sections also, like she has them divided up. As you can see, we're coming up into another section, aren't we, at one point at the last section?
Yes.
4, amendments for consistency with 2138. If you want, we can take them as a group to make it more efficient. We were just worried about overwhelming you or confusing you or confusing the issues. But we can do what you want, or we can take 2 at a time,
So my only concern with that, thanks, John, is that some of these items brought a lot of conversation in P&A with the public and with the people that we're working with. So I just want to make sure that I respect their time in case they want to. Obviously, that will be still, the vote will be open to the public, but because there is a lot into it, I just don't want to discount any possible conversation that might arise. So that's the only concern I have. Otherwise, I would like that too, John. But our session at P&A meeting were very active. So just in case, there are more concern to be brought. Roseanne, do you see any?
What I can suggest, if everybody's good with it, we're coming toward the end, I promise. We have items 7 through 10 in this next section. I can go through that as a chunk, and then we can open up for discussion and then do a motion. And then the very last item, set 4, there's 4 of them in there. I can do that as a chunk, and that'll break it up a little bit if everybody's okay with that. Okay, let's try proceeding with that. So I'm going to start with 7 and go to 10. On pages 12 and 13, 20A12 and 20A13 in your packet. And then we'll discuss those as a group and do a group motion for those. So 7, acceptable LCSW continuing education providers. Currently the law, if you look at it word for word, it states that only the social workers can only obtain continuing education from an accredited school if that school is accredited by the Commission on Accreditation of the Council of Social Work Education. It doesn't permit social workers technically to gain continuing education from a school accredited by the U.S. Department of Education or the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education. Staff believes this is unintentional and they should be able to gain from those accredited institutions, just like LMFTs and LPCCs can. So we want to amend Business and Professions Code section 4996.22 in LCSW law to permit clinical social workers to obtain CE from the U.S. Department of Education recognized or accrediting from a school accredited by accrediting agency recognized by the USDE or approved by the BPPE. So that's item 7. Item 8, in section 4999.46.1, which is LPCC law, there's a duplicative definition of supervision. It's in there twice. We recommend deleting the duplicative definition of supervision in Business and Professions Code 4999.46.1 because it's already elsewhere in that statute. Moving on to item 9, LMFT and LPCC law both have provisions establishing a misdemeanor charge and a fine of $2,500 and or 6 months in a county jail for violating the respective licensing acts. However, LCSW law has this clause and it only sets the fine at $1,000. Psychology Board has the same clause that it sets that their fine at $2,000. There's just no consistency to the fine. Doing some research, we can't figure out where that came from. It's a court fine. It's not an administrative fine. The board can do administrative fines, and that's established in regulations. These are actually court fines. The statutes, doing some research, were set in the 1980s. Unfortunately, we can't, the way that the legislative website is set up, that we can't read the bill analysis to find out why in the 1980s they set these different statutes with different amounts of fines. And so we are proposing an amendment to remove the fine amount and say the fine is determined by the court and or 6 months in jail instead of specifying these unequal fines. We did reach out to the Assembly Business and Professions Committee to see if they could address this as a cleanup amendment in the board sunset bill, and they indicated that's a possibility and the willingness to work with us to examine the issue. So that is that particular proposal. And then finally, item number 10, we are proposing to amend 4996.17.2 of the Business and Professions Code. Subdivision C of that section contains an incorrect reference. Last year, there was a bill run that renumbered another section that's referenced in that section. And so the correct reference in that section is now 4996.18E, not 4996.18G. And so we want to make that correction. So that is the items 7 through 10 of this particular group of changes, and we can discuss those now as a group.
Roseanne, just for Ross, just a second for clarification, even with our legal counsel, can we actually, obviously we can discuss as a group as we vote, can we act as we will do with a consent calendar? Unless someone wants to pull out one of the three, we can have one vote for the three of them?
Right, you can do whatever you'd like. You can have a discussion. If there are any amendments or changes, we can capture that in a motion, or we can, pull out one and have the motion for the other three.
Okay, let's see where the conversation goes, and then we'll make the decision. So open to the public. Anyone has any comments? I know Ross comes first.
Really quickly, so are these for when there's board, when there's like conduct, and then they have to pay these in addition to any sort of like cost of probation or investigation? These are the set fines for the violations?
Those would be the set court fines or violations. The board doesn't actually charge them. It's just set as that's what the court could charge. And so it's not really, it hasn't been problematic. We just noticed that it's inconsistent and they've just been in law forever and we're not sure why. And so since it's a court fine, it looks like they have the right to do it, but it doesn't seem right to specify different amounts for our different license types.
Okay, I was just asking because normally on misdemeanors in courts, it's usually up to $1,000 and or 6 months or less or a year, depending on the crime. So it's weird that it's, that much more. And I just want a clarification.
Yeah, and we don't really know what the courts are actually charging. And so we think it's just better that we just say as determined by the court.
Mm-hmm.
I also think we shouldn't be in the business of defining these fees. It's really not our jurisdiction, so to speak. The court will assess that, and we don't want to mess with that because obviously it's not in our legal capacity to even reinforce that by any means. So any other discussions about any of the three amendments that Roseanne has read? There were three, right? Yeah.
Four.
Four.
Items 7 through 10.
7 to 10, including 7. Yeah. Any other discussion?
John quickly had his hand up.
John, I'm sorry.
You're okay. He's shaking his head no now.
No hand.
Okay, so I would say no. I don't see any other hands raised or any other comments.
Members of the public? No one? So at this point, since we singled out any particular amendment that needs to be voted apart for any possible changes, we could read a motion that apply to amendments 7, 8, 9, and 10, and then vote just once. Okay, perfect. Christina?
So the motion for items 7 through 10 to direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Wonderful. One more last appeal for any other comments from the board.
I'll move.
Okay, we have a motion. Any comments from the public? We need a second.
I'll second.
John, seconds. We can move to the vote.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinga,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so for the next 4 items, amendments made for consistency with AB 2138. I'm going to go through all of these and then we can do the same thing. I take comments and a motion at the end. These amendments all have to do with the passage of AB 2138 a couple of years ago. AB 2138 changed the criteria used to allow denial of licensure based on convictions of certain acts or crimes. And so that is already law. It substantially changed Business and Professions Code section 480 and a few other sections related to it. And so these are minor or technical or non-substantive changes in that we need to make our law consistent across the statute because there are some sections of our licensing law that are now inconsistent with AB 2138. So that's what we're trying to achieve here. The first one is the language used surrounding qualifications for licensure or registration. There's the sections listed in number 1, list criteria needed to qualify for a license or registration. And one of the criteria is the person must not have committed any acts or crimes constituting grounds for denial of license under Business and Professions Code 480. 480 outlines reasons a board might deny a license. And like I said, it was significantly changed by AB 2138. Business and Professions Code 480 used to allow denial of licensure based on convictions or certain acts, and it used the word acts involving fraud, dishonesty, or deceit. However, now that language has been changed. It doesn't say acts anymore. It says denial is permitted based on certain types of convictions or based on formal discipline due to professional misconduct that occurred within a specific time frame substantially related to the profession. So given the recent change, the language is inconsistent with 480. So we want to strike the old language that the applicant must not have committed any acts or crimes constituting grounds for denial under 480 and add an amendment that simply states that the person must not be subject to denial of licensure pursuant to 480. So we're basically just pointing back to 480 and saying, look here to make sure that you can do it, basically. So that's item number 1. Item number 2 is a reference to Penal Code Section 290. Penal Code Section 290 is a code section that specifies various types of crimes for which registration as a sex offender is required. Penal Code 290 is being reorganized effective January 1, 2021. Under the new version of it, it's been organized, the types of sex offenses have been organized into 3 tiers depending on the severity of the crime. So now the higher the tier, the longer the required registration as a sex offender. The two higher, so AB 2138 amended Business and Professions Code 480 to specify that only the 2 higher tier sex offenses in the new Penal Code 290 are subject to denial of license regardless of the 7-year age limitation. The third one, the kind of the lowest tier, the lowest grade violation, is not included in that. However, there are several sections in the Board Practice Acts that specify denial for any required registration under Penal Code Section 290. However, that language in our Practice Act is now overridden by the changes made in AB 2138. So we need to make it consistent. So what we're proposing here is to amend the above listed sections, listed in item number 2, to specify that any denials due to Penal Code Section 290 registration must also be in accordance with the conditions for denial specified in Section 480, and that lists the specifics about Penal Code 290. So basically, again, pointing it back to 480 so that we make sure that our law is consistent throughout. Moving on to item number 3, are unprofessional conduct provisions. These sections contain a definition of a conviction. AB 2138 amended the definition of the conviction. So we want to make an amendment referencing that definition here. These sections also contain language permitting suspension, revocation, or denial of a license, regardless of whether a conviction has been dismissed pursuant to Penal Code Section 1203.4. However, that's no longer allowed, based on AB 2138 and also a bill a few years prior to that, AB 2396. Under those bills, denial of licensure is no longer permitted on the basis of this type of dismissed conviction. So the board has made an amendment, or staff is proposing an amendment stating that actions to suspend, revoke, or deny a license must be in compliance with Division 1.5 of the Business and Professions Code. That includes Section 480 and kind of its surrounding statutes that govern denial, suspension of revocation of licensure. By doing that, we'll make sure that, that the law is consistent with what it says in 480 and its surrounding sections. And then finally, item 4, a reference to statutes governing license denial, suspensions, or revocations. Section 499.80 references various laws governing license denials, suspensions, and revocations. It fails to reference Business and Professions Code Section 490 about suspensions and revocations. We believe that 490 should be included in the list of reference sections, so we're just proposing to include 490 in the list of reference sections here. So a very minor change there. So that's items 1 through 4 under Section 4 of our proposed changes, and I will now open that up to discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. As we did before, any comments from the board?
Just want to say that, reiterated that these sections are actually previously approved by the board. And so there's really not much changes, so what has been discussed has been incorporated.
Right. Thank you, Christina. We mandated for any non-substantial changes, and now they're back to us this way. So yes, any comments from the public?
I don't see anyone.
Wonderful. Christina, would you like to read the motion?
Would. Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Thank you. And this motion will apply to item 1 to 4. John, would you like to move a motion? The motion?
You're muted.
Sorry, my first one today. Does it also need to include the section it is, plus the 4 things we're looking at, or just the 4 things we're looking at?
You mean
Say
the motion?
Roman numeral 4, 1 through 4, I think.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it needed to be included that way to make it more clean for everybody.
That's a good point. Thank you, John. So John, I'm sorry, did you move the motion?
If we will include Roman numeral 4, sections 1 through 4 under it, then I would like to make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Any more discussion from the board, from the public?
I see no comment.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, Christina.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Hurwitz,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
John Sovik,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Roseanne,
Are we ready to move on to practice setting definitions? So the next item is I'm gonna discuss this the next 2 items together, and then we can make a full motion once we're done discussing. Basically, items, this is 20B and then 21. They're both interrelated, and so I think it'll be better to discuss them together. Basically, a little background. This is the discussion of the practice setting definitions bill. It's a bill that we actually ran last year. However, due to COVID, the legislature had to cut a lot of its bills short because they were out of session unexpectedly quite a bit. So it didn't really work out in terms of running the bill, not because of anything in the bill, but just because of the abilities of the legislature to get everything through. This bill is a result of the exempt setting committee that was formed for 2 purposes, basically to examine mental health services provided in exempt settings to determine if consumers were receiving services consistent with the standard of care, and then to examine different types of practice settings that offer mental health services to see if setting definitions need to be refined. The first part of the committee's objective was completed when the board ran AB 630, and then this is kind of the second step. And like I said, this has already been approved and considered by the board, but we're bringing it back because it was approved a year ago, and we have pretty much an entirely new board since then, almost. So the practice setting definition proposal places specific definitions on various types of practice settings that licensees and applicants may be working in. It classifies all settings into 2 main types. We have exempt settings and non-exempt settings. The definition of exempt settings remains the same. And non-exempt settings are all settings that do not qualify as exempt settings, but which may seem kind of obvious, but we're doing that for a specific reason. And that's because we're going to then take non-exempt settings and carve out 2 specific types of non-exempt settings: private practices and professional corporations. These definitions are used to place certain limitations on these specific types of settings that the committee felt needed a bit more of restrictions. The bill also reiterates that an individual working in an exempt setting who holds a board issued license or registration is still under the jurisdiction of the board. It reiterates that an active license or registration number is required to provide psychotherapeutic services in any non-exempt setting, with 2 exceptions. Trainees may provide it in non-exempt settings as long as it's not a private practice or a professional corporation under the jurisdiction and supervision of their school. And also the same applies, associate applicants applying under the 90-day rule can also work in non-exempt settings as long as they're not private practices or professional corporations. It allows supervision of all individuals to be done via video conferencing in an exempt setting, including trainees. Currently, the law is silent on whether trainees can be supervised via video conferencing. as the law only affirmatively states that associates can be supervised via video conferencing in exempt settings. So that's one little piece that the board had already agreed on as part of this bill, that moving forward, I think we can do ahead of the telehealth committee. I do have one change that I noticed, though, that we will need to include in the motion if the board so agrees. If you look on page 2026, in LPCC law, it is section 4999.46.2, subdivision E. It says, notwithstanding subdivision B, an associate working in an exempt setting may obtain the required weekly direct supervisor contact via video conferencing. We need to change that to the word associate to the word supervisee to be consistent with the two other license types. That was an oversight there. So we do need to make that correction if we're going to go forward with that. The language also specifies that an entity that is licensed or certified by a government regulatory agency to provide healthcare services is not considered a private practice setting. And we'll discuss that feature a little bit later in the Kaiser discussion. And it limits supervisors in any non-exempt setting to 6 individual or triadic supervisees at a time. Previously, the limit was 3 associates per supervisor in only a private practice or professional corporation. So it loosens the law a little bit there to 6 for private practice or professional corporations, but it does place a limit that didn't exist already for non-exempt settings. If a non-exempt setting is not a private practice or a professional corporation, they're going to be limited to 6 supervisees per supervisor as well. So there's a couple little things going on there that you need to be aware of. And then also one of the other big things it does, it permits contracted supervisors in a private practice or professional corporation. The supervisor must provide psychotherapeutic services to clients at the same site as the associate. So I already kind of talked about how we already had a bill number for this. We've made a couple of non-substantive changes since the October 9th Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting. An incorrect reference in Business and Professions Code section 499.25 has been corrected in 2 places. In both places, the incorrect reference to Business and Professions Code section 4980.01 has been changed to correctly reference Business and Professions Code section 499.42. I know that's really technical, but that was a technical correction that needs to be made. And also, as I said, if you choose to move forward with this as is, we need to change the associate. We need a motion to change the associate to supervisee reference on page 26 in section 499.46.2E from associate to supervisee. So that's the bill, and you can see the bill as it's proposed in attachment A. What I propose now is we go on to agenda item 21, which is discussing Kaiser's concerns related to the practice setting issue, and then come back, and once that's fully discussed, and make a motion on the bill proposal. So is that okay with everybody? Okay. So I'm going to temporarily move on to agenda item 21, which is discussion of supervision of associates within Kaiser's healthcare system. Kaiser has brought up a concern that because they frequently employ associate clinical social workers who are gaining experience toward licensure. And Kaiser, the way they do things is they're split into 3 employing entities. They have the Kaiser Foundation Health Plan, which is a nonprofit public benefit corporation. So basically under our law, that's considered an exempt setting. They have Kaiser Foundation Hospitals, which is a nonprofit benefit corporation. So again, for purposes of our laws, an exempt setting. And then they have an entity called the Permanente Medical Group. And that is a professional corporation of physicians within Kaiser, excuse me, that provides and arranges for professional medical services. So that would be considered a professional corporation. It's kind of like in the setting definition bill, it's a form of a private practice. And there's certain limitations on associates working in private practices and professional corporations. So ASWs working in the Permanente Medical Group, the professional corporation arm of Kaiser, believe that it's unfair that they have limits on their required supervision for gaining experience hours for an LCSW licensure that other ASWs working under other branches of Kaiser do not have. And they've written kind of a little summary of their concern that sums it up really well, and that's shown in attachment A. So the bill that you've just heard would partly resolve some of their concerns. Now I'm going to compare the current law as is to the proposed new law that you just heard. And although this comparison is for someone seeking LCSW licensure, the same holds true for somebody seeking LMFT or LPCC licensure. So under current law, if you look at what it says now in Business and Professions Code 4996.23.3, an associate who is employed or volunteering in a private practice must be supervised by an individual who is employed by and shall practice at the same site as the associate's employer, or they can be an owner. But if the site is incorporated, the supervisor must be employed full-time at the site and be actively engaged in performing professional services there. A supervisor at a private practice or corporation is limited to 3 supervisees at a time. So for Kaiser right now, this means that for ASWs working at their professional corporation branch, the supervisor must be employed full-time at the same site as them and perform professional services there. And they're limited to 3 supervisees per supervisor. For those ASWs working for the Kaiser nonprofit branches, those don't apply. They're considered exempt settings. Under the law being proposed in the setting definitions bill, the language has changed slightly. So some of their concerns are still there, but it resolves others. Under the new proposed law, an associate who is employed by or volunteering in a private practice or a professional corporation must be supervised by an individual who is either employed by or contracted by the associate's employer, or is an owner of the private practice or professional corporation. And they also must provide psychotherapeutic services to the client at the same site as the associate. So there's no longer a requirement that they work there full time if it's a corporation. And then for non-exempt settings, they would be limited to, instead of 3 supervisees per supervisor, we're upping that for corporations to 6. So for Kaiser, this would mean for ASWs working at its professional corporation, Kaiser would now be able to contract or arrange with outside supervisors for their associates. The supervisors would not need to be employed full-time at the same site as their associates. However, the supervisors would be required to see clients at the same site as each associate they supervise. And there would be a limit of 6 supervisees per supervisor. And again, none of that would apply to individuals working at Kaiser's nonprofit corporation. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but when we held the exam setting committee, the committee did feel strongly that professional corporations and private practices were kind of a little bit of a different setup. And so at the time that it was discussed, it was felt that a little bit of additional oversight was needed in those types of situations. So that's what we ended up with this bill to address the problem. The bill does a lot to clarify the types of settings. It'll do a lot for schools, who aren't sure where trainees, the law's not very clear right now on where trainees can work. So it'll do some clarification, but again, it's not perfect for Kaiser. It will leave some of these unresolved issues because of the concern about supervision in private practice and professional corporations and needing that additional oversight. So the Policy and Advocacy Committee, Kaiser was there and presented their case, and we discussed this. And we talked about a couple of different possible solutions or concerns that were raised. So I'm going to go over those now. It's possible that we could amend, for example, for LCSWs, let's just take them as an example. The sections that require the supervisor in the private practice or professional corporation to be supervised by an individual who provides services to clients at the same site, we could take the word site and apply a broader term, possibly. such as institution. Organization was discussed as one that would be helpful. So it would be the same organization as the associate, or at the same provider instead of site, which would mean that you didn't have to have somebody working in the same building. So I looked up just for out of curiosity, I looked up the technical definitions of these various terms that were thrown around, and I've provided those in attachment B for you. One other suggestion would be to replace the requirement that the supervisor provide psychotherapeutic services to clients at the same site as the associate with a requirement that the employer performs psychotherapeutic services for the clients of the associate's employer. So that's another possible option. Staff does urge some caution, though, when considering a solution here, as there is some potential for it to lead to less oversight of associates in a private practice or professional corporation. For example, in terms of our enforcement division, there have been public protection concerns with allowing associates to practice somewhat independently of their supervisors. We've seen associates that have somewhat set up their own private practices and were practicing independently. And so the recommendation would be to be careful to choose language that will not further this practice or make it seem like that's okay. The board's enforcement unit investigates a number of complaints where it's determined the supervisor is not on site and the associate is practicing somewhat independently. Associates are required to be under supervision because they're new practitioners, not necessarily used as just an additional person to provide therapy for our business. So not having a supervisor who is practicing at the same site reviewing their work could lead to issues such as being unaware of associate misconduct, supervisor access to records, and associates collecting payment, which is prohibited. The reason for using the word site in the law right now is to ensure that the supervisor is there working alongside them too. I did a really close examination of licensing laws after that discussion in 3 other states. One was Arizona because it's close, and then Massachusetts and Florida because they are also known to have large populations of our license types. And the findings there are in attachment C. And just to summarize really quickly, Arizona, it basically requires the supervisor to be employed at the behavioral health entity at which the applicant is obtaining hours of clinical supervision, unless they have a supervisor, the supervisor and the entity have an agreement providing the supervisor the same access to the clinical records as the employing entity, and also that the supervisor's clients have authorized the sharing of the records. Massachusetts does not permit associates to gain clinical experience in private practices at all. Well, it doesn't define private practice, but it prohibits them from working there. And then in Florida, for their marriage and family therapists, their law says that a licensed mental health professional must be on the premises when clinical services are being provided by a registered intern in a private practice. So just kind of some food for thought. That's what other states, some other states have. So that's one issue. Another thing that I wanted to bring to light is the proposed subsections in the proposed bill provide that an entity that is licensed or certified by a government regulatory agency to provide healthcare services shall not be considered a private practice setting. Such an entity would instead be considered a non-exempt setting or an exempt setting, depending on its features. And it wouldn't be the subject to the above requirements that supervisors provide services at the same site, and that their associates in private practices, they would not provide services at the same site as their associates in private practices or professional corporations. Also, trainees could work there under supervision of their school if it's a non-exempt setting. It's unknown at the time if Permanente Medical Group is licensed or certified by a government regulatory entity to provide healthcare services. I tried reaching out to them a couple of times after the Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting, but was not able to obtain an answer. So I don't know that answer right now. If it was, it would be considered a non-exempt setting, and so that would answer kind of some of their concerns too. A little bit of caveat with that language when we were looking at it, the Policy and Advocacy Committee did have an in-depth discussion about that and was comfortable with that language. Do want to point out that the various types of government agencies, regulatory agencies licensing or certifying various entities is unknown. So this provision, if we put this in law, it might need some fine tuning at some point based on what we get, basically. We don't know exactly what we're going to see when we put this in here. We have a feeling that like public health and DHCS are going to be the main things we see, but there might be other entities that fall in this. So we just caution that this may need to be further narrowed or clarified if it's put in law via regulations in the future based upon implementation issues that might arise. So at this time, all of that being said, there's a few options with proceeding. We need to discuss the Kaiser issue and also the setting definition bill, and I'm kind of proposing 3 avenues for you. In terms of the sentence, an entity that is licensed or certified by a government regulatory agency to provide healthcare services shall not be considered a private practice setting. You could decide to delete that allowance if there's concerns about that and continue to run the bill, and we can continue discussing it at the Policy and Advocacy Committee. We can leave the allowance in the bill, and if there's unintended consequences, we can discuss or continue discussing at Policy and Advocacy Committee and possibly run regulations in the future, or we can not run the bill and hold it back for another year for further discussion. So I think at this point, I'm going to open it up. It's a lot to digest, I know, but we can kind of figure out a path forward.
Thank you, Roseanne. This has been conversation that hasn't just started, as we all know, so it's been taking some time and will need some adjustment and revisions, but it's a lot to take in. So I will definitely see if there are, first of all, any questions from the board or any observations in regards to the whole package, right, Roseanne? Yes. At this point, all the elements. Let me see if I can see all of you because my view changed. Okay, here we are. Okay, Christina, and then Ross, and then Kelly.
Thank you. So first, I want to thank Roseanne, and all the committees that work for that pretty big set of bills. And I also want to just give another context is that this is actually this issue came out several years ago, and it is also several years, of the work that, done by the staff and the committee and the stakeholders. Don't forget about them. And so I just have a very little clarification. So Roseanne, the green statement that an entity that is licensed or certified by a government regulatory agency to provide healthcare services shall not be considered a private practice setting. Is this language in our original bill?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I need to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Roseanne. I believe next was, I called Ross and Kelly. Am I right? Ross?
Yeah, thank you. So, Roseanne, I suppose my only concern would be, the instances that you brought up about how, they were finding that maybe associates were effectively kind of practicing on their own, that there wasn't, much supervision, that they looked like they'd almost set up their own private practice. And to the extent that we can either omit or adjust language to try to prevent that from happening, I think that would be my main concern.
Thank you, Ross. Kelly.
So this is a really interesting provision, particularly because many of the clinicians in rural communities, at least out here, they're not based in that community. The clinicians tend to be itinerant. So for instance, someone will drive from San Diego to El Centro, which is, 120 miles away, or they'll drive from Mexicali. They might have their base of, go away cat. They might have their base of, their primary base of service in Mexicali, and then come in and do 2 or 3 days of service in El Centro or Brawley or Salt City. So it seems to make sense and to give a rural practitioner the broadest ability to supervise associates if they're sort of spending those 1 or 2 days in that institution treating clients, but they're not necessarily in that physical location. The other thing that's really kind of interesting is that, at least here, many of the people that go through the pathway to LCSW tend to come in through the Title IV-E program. So you have a batch of child protection workers who want to get their MSW. They are funded through Title IV-E. They get their MSW, and then they tend to migrate toward their LCSW by doing their hours inside of a government institution, which is very common, or at least out here is quite common. Those are two things to consider. I would just note to the board, because I think almost the majority of people who have earned their LCSW out here actually are being supervised inside that government institution.
Thank you, Kelly. Before I go to the public, any other board members? We can go back, obviously, if the conversation continues, but any other comments from the board? John?
So I'm holding a little confusion in my brain. I've read this through multiple times, and there's a lot of really sticky language in it for me. And the thing that I'm wondering is the biggest emphasis of this movement to assist our stakeholders, our members, or is it to help the public at large, or is it to assist Kaiser? I'm really confused as to who we're actually assisting in this policy change.
Thank you, John. Roseanne, would you like to address that?
I can take that, yes. So the board's overall umbrella is public protection. We started the committee because there was a lot of confusion about where trainees can work, because the board doesn't really have a definition of private practice. That's really evolved over the years. And there's all kinds of settings that don't qualify as exempt settings and don't qualify as private practices. So the main goal here for the board is public protection. That being said, we want to try to reduce barriers of associates where we can, to be able to gain hours with the least restrictions possible, if public protection can be maintained while doing so.
So back on that, I see that definitely when we're looking at the first section of the recommendations for our private practice setting definitions. I'm not reflecting that same emphasis when we get to the specific Kaiser definitions. I'm just having a little bit of one part I see, absolutely. The other one, I'm kind of not sure how that is actually playing out.
Kim?
So when the committee drafted the language, we wanted to really define the specific practice setting areas. And so the language that's before you in our bill in the first agenda item, vetted, everybody liked it, we're moving forward. It's only recently that we became aware of the Kaiser situation and the way that their entity is structured. They have, as Roseanne pointed out, they have almost 3 buckets. One of the buckets doesn't meet the exempt section, and so they fall under a private practice. And so these associates, mainly out of the Bay Area, are expressing concern that they're not being treated equally. So part of our presentation to you, to the board, was to bring that to your attention, provide you some options if you wanted to consider that, and which is why we're here. We don't know, because we haven't heard, if there are any other organizations structured like Kaiser where this is a problem. So ultimately, the decision here is if we like the exempt bill language, the way it's presented, then we vote to move that forward and run it as a ledge proposal. If we do that, we do not lose the ability to modify the language if we need further adjustment, maybe to address the Kaiser situation or perhaps other entities. But or you could delete the language, or you could not run the bill. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And Roseanne, have I missed anything?
No, I'll just piggyback. I think the bill makes an important step forward to tackle some of the issues that we're having. It maybe doesn't tackle all of them. It's some pretty difficult issue. Like, so we've been working on this for about 2 years. The private practice professional corporation is a very complicated issue. This does make things a little bit better for Kaiser, while maintaining, that it does require in a professional corporation that the person has to be seeing clients at the same site. So there's still that oversight, but that's what at least when the board discussed it in the exempt committee, that's what was felt was needed for public protection. So it's a step forward. It's maybe not the big giant step forward that everybody was hoping for, but there's nothing saying that we have to walk away from the issue with the bill if we decide to run the bill.
Christina, and then I would like to hear from the public, because I know we have stakeholders that might be willing to share. Christina?
So I want to, again, reiterate, all the work that we have done, for, to craft the bill. And, and it's almost to me like, I think Kaiser would be certainly one example, and if we change the bill, to kind of like, I would put it this way. I would really prefer just to, get the bill as it is, to submit it so that, we know that, that we trusted our, original discussion. Like Roseanne said, it's a big step forward. And I really want to, continue to have that conversation with Kaiser, with that, unintended consequences, and then be able to deal with it in the P&A meeting. So because, the bill is already, hanging out there for 1 year, and any of the change, I just really, a little bit leery that, if we delete it, I don't even know what would be the other side of the, unintended consequence. So I would really prefer that we just leave the bill in there. I mean, leave the allowance in the bill, and then we move forward with the package.
Thank you, Christina. Any members of the public that would like to share?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, I know in the past we had Kaiser actually sharing their concern.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the board. Is anyone that would like to make a motion to approve the proposal as it is without any, yes, Roseanne?
With one substantive change. Change on 499.46.2E to change the word associate to supervisee.
I would like to make that motion, including the amendments that Roseanne said.
I'll second the motion with also sharing the concern that some of us have brought to the conversation. One way, there is the history of this work that brought a lot of trust in our staff, in our conversation, but at the same time, making sure that, we don't think just a Kaiser as we're not trying to carve out an exception here for a particular entity, because that would be really dangerous, and leaving out, for instance, like Kelly was pointing out, certain particular communities that have additional challenges. So I think the bill, the way it is, address the first step in that direction, and then we need to do way more work to address those disparities and making sure that we're not just listening to obviously one of the stakeholders, but many of them and the variety of the stakeholders. So I think the bill might respond to that first, but it's not a complete bill. It's not a final bill by any means. So I'll second for that reason. Anyone else? Any on the board? Any
could you tell me what that change was for the motion? You a code, I think.
The motion is to direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes and to pursue as a legislative proposal. The discussed change is to change the word associate to the word supervisee in section 4999.46.2E. 4999.46.2E.
2E, thank you.
Kelly, I know you were next.
No, my final point is I think the bill as written is actually going to help rural communities. It's going to give them that breadth to be able to supervise if you have itinerant clinicians. That's my final point.
Thank you. Okay.
I do not see any hands raised.
No more hands raised. So I think we can go to the vote with the motion that was just read. And Christina?
Max Disposti,
Yes.
Ross Ehrlich,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Dr. Diana Herwick,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
John Sobek,
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yes, Roseanne.
And then I have a question with regards to item 21 with the Kaiser. Would you like to direct staff to continue this discussion at when's our next P&A meeting? February? February P&A meeting. Have it on the agenda so that if somebody wants to provide.
Yes.
I think that's absolutely a great option. Yes, thank you, Roseanne. Thanks for bringing that up.
Roseanne.
And I believe our next, Roseanne, I think you still have items to go, right?
I have one more item and then the ledge update.
Okay.
Move on to that. The next item is item number 22, discussion and possible recommendations regarding license portability for licensed educational psychologists. The board recently, as you know, successfully implemented license portability legislation for its LMFT, LCSW, and LPCC applicants. That was done via SB 679. It became effective on this past January 1st. It established what we at the board call licensure by credential. It was a result of a very lengthy several-year deliberation process by the board's Special License Portability Committee on the best way to balance the ease of licensure across state lines for already licensed practitioners with public protection and the need to be able to practice safely in California's diverse environment. And so we created a streamlined license credential process, and it's for LMFTs, LCSWs, and LPCCs. The license in the other state has to have been held in current, active, and unrestricted status for at least the past 2 years at the equivalent license type, highest level. They have to have a qualifying master's or doctoral degree. They have to take certain California-specific law and ethics coursework, specific California cultures coursework, and specific coursework about child abuse and assessment and reporting in California. And they have to pass the board's law and ethics exam. But that's a very much streamlined process from all of the education and experience requirements that have to be exactly the same as ours, basically, in order to be licensed that we had in the past. So SB 679, however, did not establish license portability for LEPs. This is because not many other states license them. The only other state that I found that issues an LEP license is Massachusetts. And in checking with the California Association of School Psychologists, or CASP, which is the professional association for LEPs, Massachusetts is the only state that they are aware of as well. So I looked into the licensure requirements for LEPs in Massachusetts. They require, they're somewhat similar, not exactly. They require a master's or doctoral degree in school psychology, 60 graduate credits, 1,200 practicum hours, current certification as a school psychologist, at least 2 full years, post-master's degree experience in school psychological services, 60 hours of post-master's degree supervised experience, and passage of the National School Psychology Exam. And if you look at attachment A of your packet, Massachusetts regulations with the requirements are shown there. In California, we have a very similar but a little bit different requirements. They're not exactly identical. There has to be a master's degree in psychology or educational psychology, or there's a few other specified degree types or degree names. 60 semesters hours of postgraduate work in people personnel services, 2 years of full-time or equivalent experience as a credentialed school psychologist, and then either 1 year of professional experience in an accredited school psychology program, or 1 year of full-time or equivalent experience as a credentialed school psychologist in the public schools under the direction of an educational psychologist or licensed psychologist. And then passage of an exam specified by the board, which at this time the board does not accept the national exam. It has its own exam for LEPs. And that exam for LEPs actually includes California law and ethics. So it would be difficult to waive that exam requirement for those already licensed because it contains those law and ethics questions. So the reason, basically, long story short, that there's not a common standard, there's not an LEP license portability pathway right now is because it's not common in other states, and there's not necessarily a common pathway. So the LEP law just doesn't lend itself to portability as well. However, last year there was a bill proposal, AB 3045, that kind of raised some concern that we might need to start thinking about that, because it would have required the board, in the case of honorably discharged military members or their spouses, to basically provide a license if they could meet certain requirements. And basically, if they were licensed in another state, they submitted an application, they submitted a verification that they were in good standing, they hadn't been disciplined, and that they attested that their licensing requirements were the same, they could have a license. The board took an opposed unless amended position on that particular bill, and it subsequently died. But the board requested that its license types be removed from the bill due to omissions of key licensing requirements necessary for public protection, and the fact that we had already crafted a license portability pathway for other license types. However, LEPs were not included in that, so we couldn't argue that we had a portability pathway for LEPs. And although AB 3040 died, we're likely to see similar legislative efforts in the future. So the reason I'm bringing this to you is that the board had asked that we, in a past board meeting when we discussed the bill, the board members had asked that we talk about it for LEPs. And also it's just better to, because we know this might come forward again this next year in terms of when legislation starts running again. If we're going, it's better that we have discussed the issue than to not have discussed it or thought about it at all when we know it might be coming. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any comments from the board?
Actually, I'd like to hear from Chris.
I think we all do.
Go ahead, Chris.
The irony of all this is that I actually did my graduate work in Massachusetts. So it's funny. So I don't know that I fully, I mean, you're right. There's only one other state that has an LEP. So, the question about the portability between those two states is one thing. But there are other, I've gotten questions as a CASP board member from people coming from out of state who are not necessarily licensed, but are looking to get their LEP. Actually, most recently, it was a veteran from Texas that was coming to California, had been practicing for X number of years. And he said that because he was a veteran, he kind of got fast tracked and was able to take his test, his LEP test, and passed it, and all of those good things. So, I don't really know kind of where I stand on it, other than knowing that having the experience of coming from Massachusetts back to California. Now, again, this was a long time ago, but I had to almost relearn everything, because California is very, very different than other states when it comes to special education law, when it comes to just the way that things are done here. So I think that, my biggest thing would be making sure that there's continuity between not just the nuts and bolts of how to do the job, but also the laws. I mean, the laws and ethics that go along with California, because it's just we do things different here. So that would be my biggest concern when we're thinking about public safety is making sure that whoever's coming over and looking to do. All right, let me back up a little bit too. Specifically with how LEPs work, right? So we are a big part of our job is conducting assessment, right? Looking for special needs. So we have a foot in both pools, one in the clinical side, but also one in the educational side, one in special ed law, and in the clinical practice. So I think that my biggest thought is making sure that there's that bridge between both sides of it, not just the clinical side, but also the having an understanding of the educational law, because I think that becomes really, really important in our practice, because we, like I said, we do have a foot in both pools. Does that make sense?
Totally. Thank you, Chris. That was actually very helpful. Anyone? Yes, Christina.
So Chris, but hearing for what you say, so you basically lay out, several areas. One is about California, really has a different set of, laws and culture. So any people who want to come to California practice, that itself, is a big fat obstacle. And the other thing, really, since you're from Massachusetts, and it is the only thing from Massachusetts, it is really not that common, for the LEP to come and practice. Now, I'm not saying there's none, but it's not common. And so I guess that, that's, based on what you said, it's almost like the portability, or accepting, say, like the Massachusetts people, to practice in California, really should, it will become very, very challenging because of the differences. And so, yeah. Am I hearing it right?
Yeah. And I'm actually from California. I went to Massachusetts and then came back because it's just too cold there in the wintertime. So yeah, and I know this is my own experience, and this was 20 years ago that I came back. I actually passed the national. I have a national association. I mean, a nationally certified school psychologist. I passed the NCSP and it allowed me to come to California and practice fairly simply. But that was for a teaching credential, a school psychology credential. It simply meant that I had to pay the fee and take a basic skills test, and I was good to go. But again, when you're in private practice, you're at a higher level of service than you are when you're working in a school, right? We have another layer 2 or 3 of ethics that we have to follow in private practice because we don't have that. You don't have that oversight all of the time. So, learning that piece of it is different from when you're coming from one area to another. The nuts and bolts of the job is the nuts and bolts of the job. We're all trained in therapeutic orientation, we're trained in assessment, all those things. But to your point, Christina, California is just, it's different. And I think that would be true for any state. So making sure that there's that law and ethics component when people come over, understanding that there's some sort of additional education into California culture. I mean, just listening to Kelly speak about, all the different types of services that we have to provide here really run the gamut. And I don't think anyone could have all of that knowledge without having the experience of the training. So that would be my 2 cents or 10 cents. I tend to talk a lot.
You actually gave us more than $5, so that's wonderful. So, so actually what you said, it's very also consistent with what the License Portability Committee, considered. because that was also, the, if let's say, we don't look at their background, if we accept the, the LEP from Massachusetts for now, right? And when they come to California, they basically have to, take and pass the law and ethics exam, and then also, take that, for what I think it's like 45, credit, the California culture and practice, the one that we require for the other licensees. I think it's 45 credit.
No,
I don't remember.
Anyway, there's, I want to say about 40 units of CEU, and it's a combination of
right.
Yeah.
Yes, basically it's the CEUs required, to, in regards of the California culture and the treatment. So, and that's actually very consistent with what the bill, the law now, that we actually recommended.
Anyone else? Oh, John, yes.
In the creation of this concept of creating this portability for the LEP, how much did their state association have input and give you feedback on what will be best for their membership?
In the creation of the LEP portable license portability?
Yeah, in this conversation we're having about specifically LEPs being added in.
None, other than just a general request to look at it. But yeah, if we were going to do something like that, then we would want them in the conversation, definitely. I think the proposal, or what we're bringing to you today, is, do we want to even look at it? Do we want to have something prepared in the event that we see another bill like we saw last year, where the legislature will decide what occurs where we have no input?
I think it's a good idea. And just for face value too, as we know, we've had a lot of talk today about making language consistent and bringing all of the licenses, on an equal playing field. I think that's one of the biggest things that I feel for LEPs too, is that we often feel as a group, because we're small, that we're often not, thought of as equal partners within the board. So I think that doing whatever we can do to create equity between all the licenses would be would benefit everyone.
Okay. Yeah, and personally, John, there were a couple of, as we were brainstorming in the office, there were a couple of spots where I thought, oh, we could do it, substitute experience for that, because maybe you can't get that experience after you've been licensed, and to Chris's point, other educational requirements to meet. So I think staff could probably come, sit down, come together and determine a proposal and bring it back.
Right. Okay. Thank you, everyone from the board. I would like to see if there is any public comments. Kim, do you see anyone?
I do not. Okay.
Roseanne, how would you, I know Christina is appearing because she knows.
I don't know.
She appears when we need her.
I'm just here to take the roll call.
I don't know that we need a motion. I would think maybe direct staff to bring the issue to Policy and Advocacy Committee, and maybe with a couple suggestions, and then we can kind of look at the law and figure out where we'd like to go from there.
I would like that without having to make a motion, right?
Yeah, so we'll just go to the Policy and Advocacy in February.
Okay, I know Sabina was trying to say something. Sabina?
Oh, no, I was just totally agreeing with everybody. You're amazing. Yes, no motion needed.
Okay, I guess at this point, we just give a mandate to staff to work with the Policy and Advocacy Committee and elaborate more on the specific of the language. Come board anyway. This is really not obviously the end of it, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can continue the discussion and have a closer look at the law, at the actual, how the law is set up, and kind of see where we can make some changes.
Wonderful. Okay. And I believe that we're moving again to our item. Oops, I lost it on my paperwork. I know Roseanne, it's you again.
23, item 23, the legislative update. We're in the home stretch. Just a quick you have most of the status of all the bills that the board looked at and took positions on is in your packet here under the ledge update on item 23. A couple of key things to point out. AB 3330, the governor did sign the board's fee increase proposal. We've put that out on the website. We've put kind of an FAQ explaining the reasoning for that and and details about it on there. So there's that. There's a few bills that the board supported that are pretty important that were signed. The biggest one probably being AB 1145, the child abuse reportable conduct. Basically, this bill more equalizes what is considered reportable conduct, what types of acts of sexual assault are and aren't reportable conduct. There is some inequities in the law that this equalizes. So this is a bill that the board has been supporting for many years, and it was finally signed. So I think that's a big victory for the board. Also, AB 2112 establishes an Office of Suicide, or it authorizes the establishment of the Office of Suicide Prevention within the State Department of Public Health. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be established, but it can be established. AB 465 requires a licensed mental health professional to supervise any program where mental health professionals are responding to emergency calls related to mental health crises in collaboration with or in place of law enforcement. AB 2113 requires boards to expedite the initial license process for certain refugees, asylees, and immigrant applicants. So we'll be putting some more information for applicants on our website about that. SB 803, the peer support specialist certification bill, was signed. It doesn't specifically create peer support specialists. It's not the exact version that the board considered. It was amended. It delegates, it requires the Department of Healthcare Services to establish some standards, and then it kind of delegates the counties to form the certification programs if they would like to. So I know the office is really happy for that. It's a big step forward for peer support specialists, having training standards and being granted a specific billing code for peer support specialist services. And then SB 1474 extended our sunset date for 1 year so we can continue to exist while our sunset bill goes through next year. So that's it. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Roseanne. And I believe we're moving to our last item of the agenda. And I know we had Christy speaking. Hi,
Yes.
Christy, so good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too. And wow, Roseanne, I just have to really commend her on talking for half of a day and all the work put into that. My goodness.
Now.
Right.
For those of you that are new on the board, Christy Berger, right? Oh, Berger. She's our regulatory analyst, and she will do the introduction of this last agenda item. Christy?
Yes. So this is the status of the rulemaking proposals that have already been approved by the board. So the AB 2138 regulations have been submitted to OAL for final approval. Right now, OAL has an additional 60 working days to approve regulations underneath the governor's executive order. So we are experiencing some delays. Roseanne, I don't know if you want to fill them in on any of it.
Department of Finance kind of changed how their protocol for doing fiscal impact analyses. So our budget office was working with them, and they are working, but because there's that extension of the deadlines, they have a little bit extra time. So it went to OAL, but OAL's waiting on finance. So that's kind of where we're at right now. There's a lot of different competing priorities with COVID with these agencies. So I think they're doing the best they can.
Thank you. Yeah, so needless to say, any of these reg packages, we may expect them to be delayed quite a bit. This next one on the enforcement process, this was actually approved by the board a number of years ago, but when AB 2138 started being run, we held back because we knew it would significantly change things in our disciplinary process. So now that the 2138 regs are nearing completion, we're starting to pick this one up again. It will come back before the board with some additional amendments. So anyway, that's where we're at with that one. Our supervision related requirements that would make quite a few changes relating to those who are supervising experience for people pursuing licensure, strengthening a lot of our requirements, and it would make things equivalent across the professions and strengthen the responsibilities that supervisees have and institute some protections for supervisees as well. And it would also require the supervisor to let us know up front that they're supervising and that they meet their qualifications. So this was approved again a number of years ago. We had some legislation that needed to pass first, and that actually wound up being a 2-year bill. So then we continued pursuing it after that time. It's just taken quite a bit of time. Where we were hoping for a January 1 implementation, but it's looking more like it might be April 1st. So we'll keep you posted on that. Our continuing education and additional training requirements regulations are in the Department of Consumer Affairs initial review process. It would update some of the content requirements on training courses such as human sexuality, child abuse assessment and reporting, alcoholism and substance dependency, and make some technical changes. One of the more larger changes it's making is updating our continuing education waiver criteria and process. And again, just clarifying some things and repealing some outdated items. So that's an initial review with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And then the last regulation package is on pertaining to exam waiting periods, professional corporations and accrediting agencies and equivalent degrees. And these are technical changes, so it's not been the highest priority. It's in preparation for the initial review process. So, but most likely I'll be working on the disciplinary guidelines enforcement process regulations first, and then we'll work that one in. So any questions on that? All right.
No questions. I just want to thank you and Roseanne for you guys' hard work. It's kind of feeling like, oh, here's the report card. We get many A's, we score many. So I just want to thank you both.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Roseanne. At this point, we don't have any more agenda items. Surprise, surprise. And just a little, saying, arrivederci to Kim Madsen because it's her last meeting with us. So again, Kim, thank you so much for everything, also for staying with us today.
Sure.
And I believe we doing the re-adjourning 5:07 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And that will end the meeting. And I think we all see each other after the holidays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think next year. We'll see you all next year. Steve, I know you.
Can you hold on for just a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, Christina, and you can hang on for just a second. If you want to.
Well, me, Steve.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, yeah. Why don't you hang on to?
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm gonna leave.
Okay, you can leave.
Wait, Kim, before you go, Kim, hold on.
Okay.
I'd like you to have publicly say with us here that when we all finally meet in Sacramento in person again, that we can make sure and all go out to dinner with you together to make a big, happy goodbye with you.
Oh, I would really like that very much. It's a date.
Perfect.
And believe, we will orchestrate that.
Yes.
Oh, we will definitely have that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure, everyone. I wish you all the best. And I leave you in good hands. It's been a wonderful experience for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Oh, thanks all. Have a happy holiday. And all of you have my phone number, so that's not changing.
Diana,
thank you, everyone. We are all dismissed. Only, me and Steve.
I'll hang up. I'm trying to talk to Diana. Where'd she go?
I'm here. I'm here, Christina.
Are you available Monday to talk?
Yes.
how about I give you a call or just shoot me an email? Let me know.